This conference will now be recorded.
And face the flag for the Pledge of Allegiance. Ready, begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States
of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, everyone.
Do a roll call, shall we, Madam President? Director Borrego. Here. Hello, hello. Director Johnson.
Here.
Director Duncan. I'm here. Vice President Baker. Hello, hello.
Hey, I'm here.
And President Beck.
I'm here.
Just FYI, for those of you that are remotely dialing in, we just had a little
Technical
audio visual issues out here, so we can't see what's happening online, but we're fixing that here in the next minute or so.
We're trying.
Thanks, Jeff.
And thanks for joining us, Tammy.
Thanks, Tammy. What's the temperature, Tammy?
You want to ask?
59 degrees.
I'm telling Cyrus, probably 50 degrees cooler where she is. I was trying to guess.
Yeah.
So, yeah, great.
At 8 o'clock this morning, Tammy, it was already 100.
Yeah.
Wow.
And
So what's 50? What did you say once, Tammy? How much? How cold?
59.
Wow.
59.
20 degrees.
So basically, it's dark.
But it's not like a
So, yeah, get rehydrated. Soak up that water. Okay, so we have an agenda before us. And if there are no objections, I will entertain a motion to approve it.
So move.
Thank you, David. Do we have Diane second? Diane second. All right, because Tammy is remote, we have to do roll call. So, let's see, we have a motion to approve the agenda. I have to get my brain back in focus here. So I'm going to call the roll. Director Duncan?
Aye.
Director Johnson?
Aye.
Director Moran?
Aye.
Director Baker?
Aye.
I also approve. So we've got an agenda. Do we have any comments from the public, whoever they may be? Or any requests for future agenda items? No, so fun. Hearing no click, I am going to ask if, oh, that's the hard one. I thought this. All right, any comments from the directors? Any upcoming announcements or anything else?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
I would hope that staff would consider taking on some interns this year during the school year. As you know, the high school program that I participate in has had an internship program with the state park, where the students go up on Thursdays for about just short of 2 hours every Thursday. They rotate through all the departments. They spend about 6 weeks in each department. So that means customer service staff, administration, maintenance. They actually rotate through the archaeology lab and the paleontology lab as well. And the school would like to expand the internship program. The rest of the week, then I have them in a study hall. And so they're not getting a lot of education in the study hall like most students. So I was hoping that you would consider hosting some intern students. Even last year there were 12 in the class. I suspect this year that there will be less, far less. So they have just about roughly 2 hours. They will be available every Tuesday. Transportation is on the school to get them here. And if you could think of a way that they could rotate through your departments, that would really be appreciated.
Are there other local businesses that are of interest to interns?
Yeah, Avna is going to take on some internship students. I talked to Harry Turner about doing something at the brand show. Martha Decker is having conversations with ABF, Macosta, and there was someone else that just had escaped me here. But yes, there is
Okay.
interest by other parties within the community.
How about the school itself, the admin office? I'm just curious,
Never really thought about that, to be honest.
because they do stuff too.
Yeah, they do stuff. But I mean, my hope was to get the students out into the broader community.
Yeah, that makes sense, though.
Yeah.
I hope Jeff will look into that. Really interesting. I mean, could be future employees here.
We'll find Roy's replacement.
I know.
That's what I'm thinking, we'd love to.
We have other graduates of Borrego Springs High School that are here, so I think it's a wonderful idea.
Yeah.
Any other comments from the directors? All right. Any correspondence? Have we received any correspondence? Okay. Then we are going to go to section 2, the items for board consideration and possible action. And 2A, we are happy to see Mr. Cyrus Beavers here today in person, which is awesome. And so we'll have legislative updates.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, Cyrus did fly in last night, and boy, are his arms tired. Take my wife, please. Whatever that was. No, thank you very much, Madam President. This is our periodic legislative update time, in which we hear from our legislative advocates both in Washington, D.C. and Sacramento about what's going on in their respective areas of jurisdiction. I guess maybe prior to getting into the update, just wanted to let the board know that Cyrus is now an independent contractor working with Best and Krieger, but it's kind of seamless on our end. The two parties are still working together. We're still going to pay the Best and Krieger probably through the rest of this year or close to it. And at some point in the future, we'll start paying two separate invoices. Our goal is to not increase our overall cost. So what we were spending now would be split between Best and Krieger and Cyrus in the future.
So Cyrus, you're going to give us a deal.
Great deal. I got a deal for you.
No quid pro quo, I'm not asking for that. Okay.
So totally amicable, it's all good. So kind of like I said, seamless on our end. Just wanted to let the board know.
Ride an airplane.
That would be pretty cool. When it's a little cooler here.
So it's legislative update time, and so I'd like to do the traditional legislative update, kind of what's the latest and greatest going on. And I wanted to talk about, initially I wanted to talk about the census, but thanks to Diane, I guess we don't need to spend a lot of time talking about the census going forward, but it's all getting back to the SDAC, to our SDAC status, and what we can do to make sure that we retain that status. Mm-hmm. Just because it is so important with grant funding and eligibility and the whole thing. So I'd like to, once we get done with the regular legislative update, talk about the SDAC issues, and it's not, I'll give you a little clue, it's not really impacted at all by the census.
By the every 10 years.
Right, the every 10-year census, right, the traditional, what I thought. What I thought we need to change, we don't need to change. So we'll talk about that later.
Okay, yeah, like an update on that.
So anyway, Anna, Lowry, are you
I see
our friends from Washington, D.C. there?
Anna's here.
Okay, cool. So Anna, the floor is yours. Good morning. Why don't we start with just the quote-unquote regular update, and then we'll get into the census or I guess it's really the SDAC issue after we get done with Cyrus, with his state update.
Great. And I can also stay on, and we can talk about that as well.
Yeah, please. Yes, please.
So good morning, everybody. It is great to be here with you. Sam Sable is also on the team, is with us here today as well. And I wanted to provide a couple of updates. One, I believe Jeff has let you all know. We're really pleased to just re-announce that Congressman Isa's community project funding request for Borrego Water District has been put forward by the Appropriations Committee. And the full request was put forward, so that would be for $3,608,800. So that's really, really wonderful. We're excited about it. There were only 767 requests put forward this year. And in the House, they're really limiting how many were going forward for different projects at all. So we're really fortunate that Congressman Isa was a big support there and put that forward. We will be hearing about the Senate ones this week. The Senate Appropriations Committee on Interior and Environment will be meeting on Thursday. So we should get that update from them on about probably Thursday night, if not early Friday morning. As soon as we do receive that, we will send it to you all and keep you informed of that update. Either way, we're feeling pretty hopeful that so long as the House and Senate can come to terms on passing these and not just funding the government through continuing resolutions, that given the support in the House, that the district will be receiving another round of community project funding. So we're really fortunate, really grateful for that. I'm going to pause there and see if there are any questions specifically about the community project funding.
Any questions, directors? Except saying it's wonderful news, we have no questions.
Wonderful. So I will just say, as I mentioned, Congress is going to be taking some time to try to figure out how to get funding to the government without it being a continuing resolution. I want to just talk about this a little bit. If you'll recall, earlier this year, federal government was about to hit its debt ceiling, and in that process, the president and speaker came up with a number, if you would, that was going to be what the pocketbook for the federal government was going to be for FY24 and FY25. When doing so, that was going to set the levels that each House and Senate Appropriations Committees were going to be putting their bills forward with. Differently, though, House Appropriations Chair Granger chose to fund the government at FY22 levels, which is far below what the deal was for the debt ceiling. The Senate appropriators have said that they were not going to be going that low, that they would be following the debt ceiling deal. And in fact, they've actually plussed up a couple of accounts as well. So I say the continuing resolution bit, we know that they are definitely not going to be making their September 30th deadline. So we're at least going to have an interim continuing resolution until about the end of the year is what appropriators are preparing for. We're hopeful, though, that they are able to come to terms and find a way that for the start of the year that they can fund the government and these FY24 bills that we're working for, including our appropriation request, can go forward. One thing that they're really going to have to figure out, though, is the House going to come up? How far can the Senate come down? Where are they going to meet in the middle? So that's really going to be where the tough negotiation is. And that's fairly common. We see often that the tough negotiation is how much is in the kitty for the year. So we thought that was resolved with the budget deal or with the debt deal. But as I've mentioned, the appropriation chair has changed that in the House. So we're keeping an eye closely on that. That is definitely informing a lot of the things that are going on in the government. They do have a deadline of September 30th to also meet for the FAA reauthorization and national defense reauthorization. So they have a lot of things coming up on September 30th, and the House is leaving for their August work period on Friday. And the Senate will primarily be in the states as well for August. So we really are just looking at just a few short weeks of work available that they have to get everything done in. So we're trying to set our expectations realistic that we're most likely going to see these things throughout the fall and into the beginning of the new year. As we're looking at this, we are making sure and trying to continue to highlight to our members and our appropriators that there's the programs that we need to make sure continue, that we make sure that the programs that have funding availability, outside of the community project funding continue to be funded at levels that will provide meaningful funding support for infrastructure development. And these are ones that we've highlighted before with the district. We are looking into one right now that may be an option from the Army Corps of Engineers that is specifically for small and rural water systems. Specifically, it also accompanies our census conversation, and actually, fortunately, we would still be qualified for it under that program. So I'll pause there and see if there are any other questions or if anybody would like to just dive into anything else that I may not have covered so far.
Any questions from the directors?
I'm sorry, Anna, what the Army Corps thing was for small water districts?
It's a specific program that the Army Corps, they're running a pilot on. So we've contacted the Army Corps to get some more specifics. I'm just trying to pull up the exact program name here. If you'll bear with me 1 second. Here it is. It's for small and disadvantaged water it's a small and disadvantaged water grant. It's a pilot program that they're going to be pursuing. So we contacted the Army Corps, and Lowry and I are actually going to have information that we're going to send to Jeff before the end of the week on that. It may be one that might be fruitful for the district to apply for in trying to get just another entity supporting our infrastructure development.
Okay, thank you.
Great. Any questions from the directors? Any other questions? Tammy, are you good? Okay. I think you can go forward.
Great, and I will stay on for the census discussion to help out there and be a part of that as well.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Cyrus, I guess it's your turn.
Thank you. Glad to be here. So, missed the you remember, this is actually my second time here. It's just last time I was here, it was just me and Jeff in the room. So I got the district tour, and glad to actually be in the room with you for the first time. So, a couple more details about the issue that Jeff brought up, because I didn't want to be here in person and talk to you about this change that's happening at BK. From the outside, you'll see nothing. This is really an internal change. It's just, instead of me being an employee, I'm going to be a contractor, providing the exact same services, and it's literally the same contract. So that's the point I wanted to emphasize. That's not a new contract or identical contract. It's literally the same contract.
It's just it's how BVK employs you.
Right. In fact, BVK has gone to the link that they will maintain their status as a lobbying firm through the end of the year, so you can just continue to pay checks the same way, and then we'll handle them internally. Eventually, BVK would like to step back from that, and at that time, clients would register with me. I'm a lobbying firm now. So right now, both BVK and I are lobbying firms, and I'm the only registered lobbyist with my lobbying firm. Eventually, BVK would like to end its status as a lobbying firm and just be a lobbyist employer. There are heightened filing requirements. There's heightened liability. There are more possible penalties if you mess up, that you can get fined for. So eventually, BVK would like to stop being a lobbying firm and have clients register with Cyrus Sabers Advocacy, LLC, and then I take on all that overhead and liability. But even at that time, it would still be the same contract. They would then assign the contract to Cyrus Sabers Advocacy with their consent. The contract cannot be assigned without consent. What's happening right now is just a change in registration. That literally just happens behind the scenes at the Secretary of State's office. So that's all that's happening right now. The only change for you that you'll see is sometime after, as we get close to the end of the year, you'll have to change your accounting and deliver checks to 2 different places, but that's about it. So, but I wanted to be here in case if there are any questions or anything. I'm still integrated with the federal team. We still have our coordination calls once a week. 4 of my 6 clients are joint federal state clients. So yeah, the partnership continues, just in a different status.
Will you be looking for additional clients?
They have at this. The problem with being a water lobbyist is we have to deal with conflicts. If you're a Southern California water lobbyist, you can't take a Northern California client. If I have the Metropolitan Water District client, there's a whole host of clients I can't take. So sure, I would love more clients, but it's getting, the category or clients that I can take is getting narrower and narrower and narrower with each step. So there's like a natural limit to how many clients the lobbyists can have, especially in water. So with that, again, ask me any questions if you want, but if not, I'll move on. I have a couple of items I do want to.
Well, one quick question.
Sure.
So this is only for the state regulations
Yeah.
that change?
Yes.
So it's only, and then everyone on the federal side will stay with BVK?
Correct. Yeah. The federal lobbying side predates the state lobbying side. I was almost like an experiment. We started in 2015. So they recruited me over. We had no state clients in 2015. We already had an active federal program. So I came on starting to build up the program. Now, I should say, at the state level, 90% of all lobbyists are contractors. I was an employee with BVK. That's kind of the exception in Sacramento. There are not many employed lobbyists. So this is kind of the norm, actually.
So BVK is really just aligning with what is the normal.
This is standard operating procedure in Sacramento now. Yeah, doing it as an employee, but they were a big law firm, and I'm an attorney, so it worked because I could law firm can pay people.
Right.
Yeah, so, but I was an attorney, so it was fine, so I just came out in place.
So who determines the conflict of interest rules?
Clients do, really, but it's you guys. I can make any client, all my clients agree to, but I don't know, it's been a while since we started. My rules are, every client I have has to approve every new client. Within reason. Like if I took on, say, you know, a community service client that doesn't do water, I wouldn't come check that with you. If I took on any new water client, Jeff would have to say, yeah, we're good with that. Yeah, but in logging, there are no, it's not the same as legal where there are like actual ethical conflicts. It's more policy based what the client's comfortable with.
Oh, okay.
Thank you.
Sure. Okay, then I'll move on. I actually do have some legislative. We don't often talk about bills, but this is one of the most momentous years we've had in water legislation, probably since SIGMA was passed. Now, a lot of it didn't get to you, thankfully, because it dealt with pre-1914 water rights, which is really like the top issue in the Delta, Northern California is the old, water claims go all the way back to the gold mining days. And a lot of the ag interest up there, a lot of the water is actually pre-1914 water rights. And there was massive legislation on it. Thankfully, I didn't have to, come talk to you guys about it because, it didn't get here. But one thing that did hit you guys were several bills that would have affected your administration. One bill in particular, it was AB 755, which would have affected your cost of service analysis and information that you would have had to have put in that we were afraid would expose your liability. And we were so caught up in these other bills, that one kind of slipped through a little bit. So me and another team of lobbyists said, okay, gang, about 6 of us said, the whole rest of the world is going to be focused on these other big bills. We actually have to maintain an eye on our housekeeping matters and bills that really affect every water district in the state. But thankfully, we got amendments that take out, you're going to have to report a little bit more in your cost of service analysis when you do it, but it's information you already have and there's no danger, there's no risk of liability. The fear was you're going to have to make an estimate in your cost of service analysis. And if your estimate was off or somebody disagreed with your estimate, of course they could sue because cost of service is Prop 218 and you can't charge, so it would have been a mess, but we caught it in the second house. So just a few weeks ago, those finally got, because we were about ready to pull the alarm bells and start, big floor fight, everybody contact the legislator and kind of literally the deadline was, July 14th, I think on July 10th, we got it worked out. So it came right down to, the alarm bells. So we're looking at a good year. We're looking at.
Did the bill pass with amendments then?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. We've removed our opposition now that it has been amended. Yeah. So basically now you just have to report on tiers of water users. You just have to report your top 10%. The idea is they basically want to throw some daylight on the biggest water users. Now, you already have the information, so you just have to say, what your top 10% of water users are using as a way to highlight, who's being wasteful and how much is that, in terms of percentage, how much of your water is being used up by the top 10%. So, now, before they're going to make all these estimates of how that impacts cost, and that was a guess, and that's the part that we had to know, you're going to get a suit over that. So we got that out. So with that, we said, okay, fine. We kind of wanted to kill it, but with that, we said, I'll just move opposition. We're not supporting it by any means, but we're not going to try to stop it. So this is looking like a good year. All the bills that the water community, this is through Aqua and others, opposed, looks like we've stopped them. So we're feeling good. Okay, so that's legislation. And there's any bills that you've heard about I want to comment on? Okay. Can't always memorize the numbers, but I should be able to comment on anything that's of significance. But if there's no questions, I'd like to move on then to the real issue that we like to talk about, which is funding.
Okay.
So you all, I don't know how many of you know Jim Dax, but he did it. Okay. Jim Dax did us a big favor. So since I met Jeff, I've been saying, you've got to get me an entree to a particular staffer named Kip Lipper. I've known Kip Lipper for 30 years. He's a friend, but that doesn't do you any good. Because Kip Lipper has a lot of friends. And, he has a lot of subject matter jurisdiction, so you can't just say, hey, Kip, I'm your friend, help me out. It's, it's got to be a little, something's got to kick it. And I've been asking Jeff for 3 years, get me something to so that Kip will say, yes, have Cyrus come talk to me. We finally got that about 5 weeks ago. So, yeah, and I've opened up a dialogue with Kip. First effort is we're going to look at the bond language. There are 3 bond bills marching through. There's one in particular we're looking at. Kip is a Senate staffer, so there's a Senate bond bill. So that's going to be our focus. It's going to be on the March ballot next year. And I just said I know bill numbers, and now I just drew a blank. I believe it's SB 689. Don't quote me on that. It's by Senator Ben Allen. It's his bond bill. So first step is.
Pardon, Senator who?
Ben Allen.
Oh, thank you.
LA area. So he's chair of the Environmental Quality. Just happens to be Kip's area of jurisdiction. So that's the bill we're looking at mostly. And so we're looking at for funding, but I don't know how much Jeff has briefed you on. It's not necessarily funding for acquisition or funding for water rights. We have that broad language in other areas. It's when you get into the details of what happens here that we run into stumbling blocks. It's the process. You can't run a region-wide stakeholder process group with a list of property acquisitions you want, because there's a list of properties that are going to get targeted, for competition and whatnot. So it's just the things we're up against aren't necessarily a lack of funds. It's a process that doesn't work. So I'm working with Kip to try to find ways to address that in bond language, so that as money gets poured into these pots that we might be more accessible to us. Failing that, plan B is to fall back on what we started with, which is a budget allocation, a budget ask. We ran a deficit this year, so we didn't even try. We knew what was going to happen. But we can't, if there really gets to where we just can't tweak bond language to help us, then the only thing that might do it is just an earmark in the budget that literally says something like either calls out Borrego Water District or a water district in the desert, unconnected to the other, wholly dependent on ground. You can run a list.
Narrow it down.
Yeah, so that it only applies to one water district. So that's plan B. But first, we're going to try to see if some of these bond provisions can be improved. Now, even if we do nothing, there's still reason for hope, because there were programs that Jeff and I identified as hopeful, but were so oversubscribed or so quickly grabbed up that it was like no hope. And the bond is going to be pumping some pretty large sums of money into these programs. So this could reignite new hope for these programs that we just looked good, but just got grabbed up real quick. One in particular, it was a $100 million program. Started as a $50 million program. They did it to $100 billion. It got snatched up. Well, this next bond is pumping $300 million into that program. So, a nice little $5 million ask might actually stand a shot. I see a question.
Well, I was just thinking about bonds that I have seen and been involved with over the past, and I just think about everybody that jumps onto a bond, and then all of a sudden, what looked really good was, 50 different people for 50 different groups that have all said, okay.
What about this? What about that?
But we'll wait and see. But
that's a great point. That's the importance of having the audience with Kip.
Yeah. Yep. Kip is one of those people that somehow manages to get people in line to be the ones to grab up a pot. So if you're working with him, and that's not unreasonable. So like that one we mentioned, which was a $100 million program, that was targeted to southern part of the California Valley, where there are ag lands that they really need to reduce the water. This was the Porterville, the East Porterville, places we heard about. We had well collapses and trucking. Yeah. So that program, it was kind of targeted towards that. So okay, it was reasonable that they grabbed that money up real quick. Well, so if you're working on a program like that in advance, it's understandable that you would be one of those people that is in there getting the allocation. So that's really what I'm working on right now.
Okay. Good.
I believe that's my report, unless there are further questions.
Anybody?
And with that, if I can be excused, I have to get my airplane back up in the airport. It's too hot.
Too late for that. You got to stay another day.
I just want to make sure that Jim Dax is now an an alternate on the Water Master Board here. He's the alternate community representative, and, yeah, so he'll be sort of, well, representing more and more of Borrego.
Okay, well, shake his hand and say thank you.
Okay.
Next time you see him, because he did us really good service.
Yes.
Excellent.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Cyrus.
Thank you. Life safe?
Yes.
Thank you.
And so Anna, I guess we're back to talking a little bit about the census. Are you still there, Anna?
I am sorry, I was trying to get my computer to cooperate with me. Jeff, do you want to start given Director Johnson's great work that she's pulled together as well?
Jeff just came back into the room.
Okay, so, maybe Diane, you can help me with this. So basically this gets back to the BWD is qualifying as an SDAC or not. I guess, maybe Diane, why don't you help me? Because Diane had some really interesting information kind of about what happened recently and what we found out about the source of the median household income information. Because that seems to be, for most of the agencies, kind of the most important trigger for whether you're an SDAC or not. And then Diane even remembered attending a meeting at one point where the announcement was made by, I think, some state agency that, okay, and they told us, okay, Borrego, you are now an SDAC. So this, obviously, I think, honestly, the most important issue we have facing us right now is this issue,
right.
Like economically. Because it's so important for eligibility for grants. There's so many SDAC pots of money that were specifically identified in a lot of these most recent grants. It even impacts direct eligibility because, like on the wastewater treatment plant grant, if we're not SDAC, it's a loan. If you're SDAC, it's a grant. Now think about the difference between that.
Oh, yeah.
The difference between a low interest loan and a grant. I mean, that's huge. And so, I mean, the good news is, you know, we received over $9 million-ish in grants of this direct federal appropriation late last year. So we've done very, very well. But, you know, we're not done. As Cyrus is mentioning, you know, we have water right needs, obviously a lot of infrastructure needs continuing. So, boy, being able, maintaining our eligibility as an SDAC is critical for our just future grant funding potential. Now, you know, we are what we are, you know, the numbers are what they are. So we just want to make sure that, you know, something dramatic happened last time. The median household income went from the mid-30s to 80,000 in one source and 103,000 in another source. Like, that's a huge jump. So it just seems like, which, you know, one theory is, some people might not jump at this chance and might not respond for various reasons, which would definitely impact the numbers that result. So my initial thought was this was a U.S. every 10-year census issue. Thank you very much, Diane. I kept bugging her. She does so many different things. She was working on food banks and all kinds of other stuff. How's your homework coming along? I kept bugging her. She's like, give me 2 more days. I got a food bank crisis. These are my words. Working on this and that. So thank you very much, Diane. She's our expert researcher, right? I mean, she's our go-to person. So she found out a lot of interesting things. So honestly, sitting here right now, I don't know what we need to do yet. I do know that we don't need to focus on amending the 10-year census, right? So Diane, if you could help, just share with everyone what you've learned, and then, you know, we'll continue to work. I don't think we're going to ask for anything of the board today. We're just going to continue to try to figure out kind of what we need to do to make the real impact where we can maintain our status.
Okay.
So, if you don't mind, Diane, instead of me trying to repeat what you told me.
So they changed, income data is not asked for on the 10-year census anymore. It used to be on the long form of the census, which only some people got, but they moved that whole thing aside, and it's income data, including median household income, is only asked for in something called the American Community Survey, ACS, which is also done by the Census Bureau, but it's mostly done by mail. I think I did a quick study on it this morning. I think I saw they send out 3.5 million surveys by address. I'm sure they have some complicated algorithm that they use. And if the people don't answer in a month, then they'll try phoning them, and if they still don't answer, they'll send someone out. But it's mostly, but so obviously it's just a sample. If it's only 3.5 million people, and they're running all kinds of algorithms again, I think, to project out. It is, the ACS is a rolling 5-year set of data, so it might go from 2010 through 2014 or 2016 through 2020. And it was, so an odd thing is that the Department of Water Resources has what they call a DAC mapping tool. And Borrego is not shown as even as a disadvantaged community on there, much less severely disadvantaged. And the most recent data that DAC mapping tool, from what I can tell, the most recent data it includes is the 2016 through 2020. But I mean, this is so confusing. It's just, I think we're just at the point where it's saying, wow, this is really confusing. There is a statement on a little pop-up menu on that online DAC mapping tool that says, you will also have to pay attention to what your specific grant lists as eligibility. And that part is making me wonder if we need to ask Cyrus to do at least some investigation up in Sacramento, trying to talk to people within DWR and the State Water Resources Control Board. Those are our two main California ones.
I mean, you can say also on the federal side, because this 20% cost share of the, what they call the ISA Padilla money from last year, right? The Borrego Springs Resort Transmission Main and SunGold, that 20% cost share, we can request a waiver of that 20% if we're an estimate. We can't if we're not. So,
right.
And I think this is an EPA grant, so it gets back to the EPA, what's EPA's definition? And I think, Dan, you also mentioned to me at one point that you found that different agencies use different criteria, that the Cal EPA has some, it's not just median household income, it's this plus this plus this over this, and there's a formula that the Cal EPA uses. And so it's
there's no
confusing. And it's kind of one of those specialties that nobody knows anything about. Like there's no go-to census person, like thank you, Anna and Lowry and Cyrus, everyone. They've kind of never heard of this, never really dealt with it, had to dig deep. Thanks for creating that memo, Anna. Thank you. But it's kind of a head scratcher for everyone. So we're going to keep proceeding, figure out kind of what we need to do as we go. We'll keep you in the loop. But yeah.
So when was the last ACS? Do you know?
No.
I mean, is that where our new median income came from, you think?
Yeah, it kind of has to be. Let's see. I think the latest possible one would be through 2021. It runs like almost a full year behind. I was just reading. So we're just a little past the end of 2022. So they wouldn't have done 2022 yet, I don't think. I'll check on that. But
so Anna, on your memo about the criteria, clearly there are different criteria for determining whether you're an SDAC or not. Is it dependent on who you're applying to for your grant, or how do you determine which set of criteria you use for your?
There are differences even between California state
I
agencies.
saw that.
Yeah.
So how do we? I mean, I guess that's what you have to work on. Okay.
But we're not going to stop it.
But I thought that was very helpful, and it kind of highlighted how that there is a lack of consistency with. what defines an SDAC.
I was talking with Bree Fordham like a year or so ago. She must have been looking at grants, and I think on Cal and Byro's screen, so the Census Bureau divides geography up in different ways, and there's something called a census tract and a census designated place. And Bree was searching some tool, I think it was Cal and Byro screen, that if she searched on Borrego as a census designated place, she got one answer on median household. And if she searched on it as a tract, she got another answer. And I think that might have been because Ocotillo Wells is included or not. And
one of them, not the other.
in fact, that's a good question, wondering if Ocotillo Wells data was included this time that the NHI jumped so much.
I can't imagine that it would bring it up.
No, it would definitely.
Well, and it's 92004 still out there. So
Right.
I guess it would depend on how they divide.
They don't seem to use zip codes. They divide things up other ways. But yeah, this is complicated stuff.
It's like going down a rabbit hole. I mean, it's like the more you find out, the more confusing it gets.
I tried, I contacted a Sandag person. I sort of asked around and found out there's someone who focuses on census stuff at Sandag. And he seemed very helpful, and he never replied to my emails after that. But I wonder if Jim Desmond is the chair of Sandag now. We might try going through the Revite committee path, or just contact Desmond and say, could you light a fire under this guy?
Well, would Sandag be the ultimate answer though?
No, but they might help us figure out this wildly tangled. We haven't let Anna talk.
Yeah. Anna, do you have information you'd like to share?
So I think, can you all hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, great. So the biggest thing I think is, and Larry and I are going to connect with Steve as well, but I think, there's going to be on the federal side for us to challenge this, there's a laid out process, which is what that memorandum goes through and talks about what the process is for challenging it. In certain situations, like USDA has their own criteria, it's based on population size, not on monetary, so not on your median income. But EPA, Bureau of Reclamation, they are going to be based on median income primarily. And so if we're thinking that our numbers are very wrong, if we're wanting to make sure our designations stay in certain places, we will need to take the steps to pursue that as well. There are potentially other options that, Jeff, we haven't even gone through yet to talk about, which would be if we wanted to do any legislative potentially fixes that would change authorizations, looking at accounting for potentially second homeowners, making them, if we're thinking they accounted for more of our discrepancies, like there may be other ways that we can also find some solutions forward too, if we'd like.
I just want someone to say, yes, you're an SDAC.
Yeah.
What was that story, Dan? Do you remember? You were at that meeting where somebody made an announcement, right?
I'm not sure I know what you're talking about specifically there. I sat in on a webinar on water resources sometime during the lockdown, and there were people from a few different agencies, and I said, well, what do you use? And there was sort of basically no answer. There was like an embarrassed pause, and they didn't really answer.
Stay tuned.
Yes.
President.
Yes. Well, I do want to thank you, Diane, for all of your digging and information, and Anna as well. Thank you for all the. We're still struggling to find the information we want, but I appreciate everybody doing what they can to help find the answer.
But So if USDA, you said, only uses population size, we are golden there. So maybe.
Well, but their population ones for some of their programs is only 10,000. They do vary. It's program by program. So um,
Oh,
I
yeah.
can send that over to Jeff as well.
We might think about like focus, it would be probably the Rural Development Administration or whatever it is, that we might think about watching their grant announcements particularly carefully.
Yeah, we're 3,000 permanent residents, and then,
Yeah.
9,000 seasonally, but we're nowhere near 10,000.
Well, actually.
Yeah, so the USDA one we would be okay under. It's going to be EPA and Bureau is the one that we still need to sort through a bit, but we're definitely going to still try working on this and figure out what right solutions we can come up with.
The 2020 census states 2,100, down 1,500 from the 2010 census, which was about 3,600.
I kind of know why that happened.
2,100 on it. Yeah, I think it's in 3,000 as a
Well, yeah, well, it's hard
criteria
to
in some
imagine
grants.
that between 2010 and 2020 that we lost 40% of the population. That's not reflected in the school district or anywhere else that I can think of. I mean, it's just, the numbers are just wrong.
Well,
Yeah.
I'll say for ours, our census was under a rock at our, wherever. We have a
Oh,
lot.
really?
Yeah, and we just happened to be there.
Happen to see it, yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, if they were doing that, if they were putting a rock on top of paper and thinking houses here, it's gonna blow away.
Yeah.
Especially if people are gone or whatever.
And under the past circumstances, I think there were a lot of people who didn't want to answer any questions.
Yeah, exactly.
That could account for a lot too. But anyway, I think that our population has always, for a number of years, has been between 2,500 and 3,000. So we are a very small community.
We have about 2,100 meters, right?
Just under that. Yeah, I was gonna say.
I was gonna say, there you go.
One per household.
Yeah.
We're a bunch of loners out here.
Yeah.
21 houses, 2,100 people.
There's nothing within the community that would indicate we lost 40, almost 42%.
We did lose, but not that much, yeah.
Yeah, not 42% of the population.
Every house is
I agree.
Can't buy a house here, so.
Can't rent a house.
Right, everything's full, like where, yeah,
It's bad.
where does the vacancy show up? Does it show up in the housing inventory?
You are so right there. We have a lot of Airbnb.
Opposites happen. Okay.
Okay,
Thank you,
thank you, Anna.
Thanks, Anna. Thanks,
Appreciate
Larry.
it.
Or no, Larry wasn't
Thank
there.
you all.
Question? Wait, I have a question.
Okay, go
Oh,
Tammy.
Tammy.
I'm a little uncertain about the next steps. It seems to me there's sort of three, if I'm hearing this right, maybe Anna, Diane, you could tell me if I've got this right. There's sort of three groups. One group is the authoritative source of population and medium income. Then there's another group, which are agencies, and agencies use different authoritative sources to create their criteria. And then the last group is grants. So there's a bunch of agencies, and they have, grants that come and go. So it's out of all that, and it seems like it's a big, complicated picture. My question is, how are we addressing it? Are we starting like, these are the grants that look possible? So then we go look at the agency and what the criteria that they use are. And then we go back to the authoritative source, the US Census Bureau, whoever, and see if we can correct some information to make that agency's grant applicable to us, which would give us focus on what authoritative source data that we should focus on correcting. I'm making that up. What's our next step? Where do we go from here?
You outlined a logical process going forward. Just for me personally, I haven't got that far yet in my own brain, but thank you very much for starting to think that through. to me, we're still in the kind of the fact-finding
Yeah, I was gonna say,
portion,
we're
but
still.
thank you for starting to compartmentalize those, because that is a good way of looking at it. I just haven't got there yet, because I don't think we know enough yet, but all those groups are very, very important. But exactly what's our next step?
Well, if we're worried
Sure.
about that 20% from the Padilla money, Anna, is Anna still here?
Yeah.
So if it's EPA money.
I'm here.
If I understand how things work right, EPA gives money to the state, which then disperse these grants, right?
So
So
not for your community project funding.
Okay.
In the traditional SRF program, yes, the federal government money goes to the state, and then the state, you apply and receive SRF funding through the state. For your community project funding, you're applying directly with the EPA.
So to start, we need to figure out what the EPA definition of an SDAC is. Yeah.
I can send that to you all. I'll pull that for you.
Okay. Yeah, and that would so therefore it wouldn't have anything to do with Cal and Viro screen since it's coming directly from DC, huh?
Right. You're not going to go through California for the community project funding.
Thank you.
So that's a good initial goal. So thank you, Diane. Thank you, Tammy. Thanks, Anna. That'd be great. What's the EPA standard criteria? Let's focus
That's
on.
the first.
Focus on making sure we can apply to that 20%, because that time's coming up, right, Anna? The federal government, the
Yes.
legislature, do something. When we spoke a week or so ago, that was about ready to be done, which that would then allow us to apply for the 20% waiver. So I think right, that time's coming up soon.
That would be.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Okay, so there's your answer, Tammy. Well, thank you so much. We're going to focus on the 20% match of the EPA stuff for now.
I don't know why I'm surprised, but I am surprised that there is no certain definition for what an SDAC is.
I mean, I always heard it's X% of the median household average, statewide, blah, blah, blah.
Turns out there's 58 different definitions of what an SDAC is. Thank you so much, Anna. I appreciate it. Appreciate your time.
So is that good, Tammy? We're going to focus on the EPA stuff first.
Oh, you have another question? Tammy? No. Okay. She's good.
Thumbs up?
Yep, thumbs up. All right. So, we're going to go down to the item 2C, the Borrego Springs Sub-Basin Water Master Board.
We have a 2B, Madam President.
Oh, we do have a 2B. Sorry.
Can't forget our wastewater treatment plant.
I was just rushing my eyeballs.
I can use skip 2B or not to be. Come on, that's our favorite item.
I know. You know, my brain has been very confused this week, so. 2B, the wastewater treatment plant progress report. Oh, have we lost Ray?
No, Greg. Greg from Duke?
Greg?
Right there.
Greg there, but no Greg.
No, we're Greg.
No, Greg. No,
Hi, everyone. Good morning.
Oh, Greg, you there?
This is Greg from DUDEC. Yeah, good morning, everybody.
Oh, great, thank you. Nice to hear from you.
So anyway, Greg's, and his co-workers there at UDEC are helping us with 3 different studies at this point. Some required by the discharge permit, some that aren't. So we just haven't heard from Greg in a long time, so I figured now would be a good time to hear about the status of each one of these projects.
Okay.
So Greg, why don't you let us know where you are?
Sure. So let's start with the first one on the list there, the EDU study. So we decided to take a little step back and redefine how much flow is an individual single-family residence contributing to the wastewater treatment plant. So to help determine that, we decided to look at water use data there in Borrego. So Jeff and his crew were able to compile a mountain of water use data over, see, Jeff, you've given it to us probably over the last 5+ years, monthly data for, I forget how many connections that we're looking at. It's probably, let's see, I have a number here. We're looking at over 600 connections. And those connections were broken into two categories. Those homes with no observed outside irrigation and those with low outside irrigation. And that distinction is important because, again, we're trying to really determine the amount of water that ends up in the sewer and ends up at the wastewater treatment plant. So the water use data for homes that don't have any outside irrigation, I think it can be safely assumed that for every gallon of water that they use, that gallon of water ends up in the sewer because they're not using it anywhere else at their home. The group with the low outside irrigation, it can be assumed that some small fraction is used outside. And that's the larger set of data that we looked at, just kind of as a gut check to see if the numbers that we're seeing from the smaller set of data, the no outside irrigation, makes sense. So I want to, again, thank Jeff and his staff for compiling all that data and sending it to us in a form that's easy for us to use. That was not a small feat. So we've taken that mountain of data and analyze it such that we can take the monthly data over the last 5 years and do some statistical analyses on how much water has been used, and then, by assumption, how much water would end up in the sewer. So we've just completed that exercise for, I think it's 63 homes that were termed no outside irrigation, and another 567 homes that were determined to have some low amount of outside irrigation. And Jeff, we haven't really run through the data yet with you. I can kind of give you some idea of the median water use for the no outside irrigation is on the order of 100 gallons per day. And if you compare that to the homes with low outside irrigation, it's over 200 gallons per day. So that all makes sense to us. That the categories that Jeff and his staff have set up, the low outside irrigation has higher water use. The no outside irrigation has lower water use. So Jeff, we'll have to have a discussion then based off of this data set to determine what is a good number to use for Borrego's single-family residence or 1 EDU water contribution to the wastewater treatment plant. But now we have a much more robust data set than we had before. And so based off of that data set and our decision on what is a single-family residence, 1 EDU's flow contribution, then you can start to look at other types of connections, meaning commercial and industrial users of the sewer system, and determine how many EDU they should be assigned. And then ultimately, this would be used again to update the capacity study, and can be used for planning for future development in Borrego and determine, how many EDU will impact the future of the wastewater treatment plant.
Greg, just so you know, Jeff isn't here, so he's not hearing what you're.
Okay. Well, I will have a separate meeting with Jeff to.
I have a feeling you'll be talking to him anyway. So.
Yes. Okay. Well, that's fine. Does anyone else who's present there have any questions on that? I know it was kind of a high level discussion on that, but any questions I can answer today?
I don't. Go ahead, Tammy.
Hey, Greg, when do you think you'll be able to present results of this study and tell us what a Borrego EDU actually is?
I think I can tell you that pretty quickly here. I don't think we need, so let's think about this. We've got 2018 through 2022 water consumption, and it's a pretty large data set. So I want to talk to Jeff and see how confident he is in this data. I'm pretty confident, but I don't have as good an understanding of the water system as he does. But this is a great set of data as far as I'm concerned. It's a matter of getting comfortable on which number to pick. So, we can do the analysis on this and say, here's the median number, here's the average number, but what's the best number to use for planning purposes, which is ultimately what this is used for, right? Do you want to pick a 75th percentile? And some of that has to do with feel of the water system, the sewer system, and I think there's going to be a back and forth discussion on that. But to go back and answer your question, the analysis is basically done as far as I'm concerned on the raw data that we got. And it's more about now getting comfortable with picking a good planning number. And that can, I think, be done fairly quickly. And we could present that to the group.
Thank you.
Greg, I have a question. When you're saying that what you're seeing is 100 gallons per day for indoor household use, is that for the whole household or per person?
That's for the whole household.
That's pretty low. I was looking at the average in the country, and they say 100 per person. So
yeah, so that's again goes back to an understanding of your water district, right? I want to make sure those numbers pass the smell test, right? I'm just looking at raw data, and yes, I agree that seems low. You also have there's some skewing in both directions, and let me qualify that. There are connections in our data set that have years of no water use, and there are connections in the data set that have a lot of water use. Quite frankly, I'm just looking at my summary table of the data here that I know you all can't see it, but we'll make this available when we present the data. But there's a residence that used on average 500,000 gallons of water a year, which is high, right? So there's going to be some, I don't want to do a whole lot of cherry picking of data because I think that can be dangerous, but I want to walk through some of this stuff with Jeff to say, hey, Jeff, is this really a single family home? That would be my first question on related to that large user of water. And then, is it fair to assume that, especially if we're thinking about future development, let's say there's a development of 100 homes planned, is there going to be a fraction of those homes that are not using water, meaning they're not occupied? Is that a fair assumption? Because that's what we're seeing in the actual data, is that there's some fraction of homes that aren't occupied for long stretches. There's single family residences. They are technically one EDU, but they're not using any water. So there's kind of some nuance in the data that I want to make sure that Jeff and you all are aware of to help guide our decision on what number Borrego ultimately picks as their EDU.
okay.
So I'm just going to take a guess. There's a large mobile home park here that has a master meter, the Roadrunner Club it's called. And if you want to make a note, it's at 1010 Palm Canyon Drive.
Okay.
I can imagine that could be.
And then actually we spoke to Rich about it, even obtaining, that area does have individual meters. So
Yeah.
we talked to Rich about obtaining the individual meter use for that development, just for the data. That's also possible.
Any other questions that I can answer on the EDU analysis?
Looks like we're good.
There's a comment from Trey.
Okay.
He said, seems we may need 2 EDUs, one for water supply and another for flows to the WWTP, which makes sense.
Say that again.
Just having separate EDUs, one for water supply and one for basically sewer flows, which I think we do look at it that way when we have a new development.
Yeah, and again, I'm just looking at trying to convert some of the water use data to a sewer EDU. And again, we want to make sure that we're looking at, and I'll have a discussion with Jeff and make sure that we're in fact looking at single family residences. Our entire list is just single family residences, and see if we need to kick out any of the large water users, or at least designate them as something larger than one EDU.
Yeah, I was just playing with the math, and we assume for a home, half acre foot a year, right? Which actually comes out to about 400 gallons a day, give or take. And that would be both indoor and outdoor, yeah. So, to me, it's just interesting that the water levels are lower than I would have expected.
Yeah, and again, we skewed it toward, because we just wanted to see what was going into the sewer, right? So we tried to look at only homes with no outdoor irrigation.
Right.
But because that was such a small data set, only 63 connections, we opened it up to include those with quote unquote low outdoor irrigation. That really increased the data. That was a factor of 10x on the number of connections we got to look at.
And there's no way to tell in terms of those homes how many people live in them, right? So it could be one person, it could be 6 people.
Yeah, exactly. And you would think that would end up averaging itself out, but clearly there's some pretty big differences, right?
Yeah, I just find it interesting. I'll be interested to see when you're ready to report how it all comes out.
Yep. Happy to present that again once we've had a smaller groups discussion on how we want to present the data. But yeah, because right now it's just a big giant table and a small summary table. So
We don't go by number of bedrooms or anything else like that,
or how many people.
Or water rate.
We have in our application form, we ask for a number of bathrooms, more of the water fixture count information as opposed to bedrooms per se, but.
Yeah. I'm just also thinking that potentially depending where a new development is, they may be bigger houses with more bathrooms or bedrooms.
You would hope in Borrego they'll go the other way, but yeah.
But in all honesty, Rams Hill potential development.
Yeah.
Those could be larger than quote unquote average. So
yeah.
Right.
Good point.
Oh yeah. But it doesn't necessarily say how many people.
Right.
It's likely that even if they have 6 bathrooms, that there might only be 2 people living in it. So.
Or for 2 months out of the year,
Yeah.
And Greg gets to the point.
Airbnb and there's 10 people living in it. So. Okay. Well, this is all really interesting. Thank you, Greg. Are we ready to go?
Of course.
Go ahead. Next topic, Greg. Go for it.
Next topic.
Last but not least, on this whole GPD for EDU. I think obviously Greg talked about the connection of the water supply. Now, Roy and I have been working on this for a while. We had a nice little powwow again yesterday to kind of make sure we're all on the same page. So there's a couple other variables on the GPD for EDU, and that is our number of EDUs that we currently allocate are wrong. We think low in most cases, maybe all cases we've seen so far, they're low, like Rams Hill Restaurant Phase 1. So, auditing the number of EDUs, because when you get down to gallons per day per EDU, that's literally the formula, gallons per day over people, right? Sorry, gallons over people. So the gallons per day over people, so that gets the number, the EDU number. So you need to know both. You need to know the gallons per day, and you need to know the number of EDUs to come up with the gallons per day per EDU. Roy's done a lot of work on both, getting accurate flow information from each one of the legs that come into the treatment plant, the Rams Hill leg, Town Center leg, and the Borrego Springs Resort Club Circle leg. Roy's done a great job. All those meters are now accurately calibrated, and he's even gone to the step of installing a Rams Hill meter.
Nice.
Because I reported to you all that back in the good old days, that Rams Hill was determined by total flow minus lift station flow.
Yeah.
So.
And that's going to be important for future development.
Yep, so I think Alan helped Roy. I think Roy, you reported at our last meeting a month ago that Alan was helping him with the trenching and making sure that everything was ready so it could actually work. And so I think the meter's in, it's running. I think the next step is for our SCADA guy to come out and actually connect it so we can actually, so Roy can monitor it on our SCADA system. So having accurate flow data coming into the plant and how an accurate flow data of what's coming in from each leg is also, once again, not the drop the mic moment, not that this is the only data point we need, but it's just more important information to help make sure that our number isn't crazy high or crazy low, but that there is supporting data. So having accurate flow data coming into the plant, super important. Knowing how many EDUs we have out there, super important. So Roy's going to go through and audit each one of our commercial EDU accounts to make sure that the EDUs do reflect reality. Okay, so those are two other really important variables that we have a much better handle on now. So, I'd love to give Greg as much data as we have from the new Rams Hill leg to show, exactly how much is coming in, and then maybe we could look at the past data to see if maybe some of the assumptions we made on how much we thought was coming in from Rams Hill is accurate or not. So a lot of progress has been made on the metering, and then Roy's just now starting to dig into the details on the number of EDU questions and what should it be. Okay, so that's kind of everything that's going on. In addition to what Greg's doing, we're also doing some work on our end. Roy's doing some really important work. Also to feed data into the system, and also he gets back to having accurate flow data to start with. Okay, so there you go. Okay, Greg, that's it on the GPV per EDU.
Okay, great. So,
will you take a public comment?
Oh, yes.
Hi,
Okay.
thanks. This is Kathy Milkey with Rams Hill, and Greg, thanks for the work you're doing for the BWD. This is important to us as we're a future development, we're a current development and also an expanding future development in Borrego, and trying to understand the current capacity at the wastewater treatment plant, and where the bottlenecks are, and how to get that improved to serve well today's customers and also future customers. It sounded like there's some data that the BWD is diligently working on, and also that you've got some information that maybe you're going to share with a smaller committee. I wondered if you could provide any timing on that so that we can understand when there might be results available.
sure. So Jeff and I can sit down the next week or two and really drill into this data and start to describe how we pick that EDU value for the district. As an engineer, I can just say let's pick this number and run with that. But Jeff and his staff have and it's needed a very good understanding of your district and its behavior and its future. So I can help guide Jeff by understanding the data and presenting him in a way that he can make a good decision, but we really need to sit down and talk through it. And that's going to take, I would say, probably the next week or two to really get a good understanding of again, this mountain of data that he's provided us.
Okay.
So August.
I think August would be fair. Yeah, I think Jeff and I can work through this fairly quickly, pending,
September.
Yeah, so I think, Greg, you're right. And so and Kathy, to answer your question more specifically, I'd say probably September, because we only have one meeting, 2 weeks from today in August. and then we're done for the rest of August. So we just need that time. So September is probably realistic, Kathy,
I'll be here.
for both the
Want to hear it.
for the GPD, and then you were asking about the bottlenecks, and that's really the other topics that Greg hasn't covered yet, the TKN studies. So, yeah, I think September 1st or 2nd meeting, not quite sure yet. Like I said, I haven't even seen the data yet. This is just kind of a periodic update, just to let people know we haven't forgotten and the work is actually being done. So, I'd love to show the details, but I think September is realistic. Maybe even the first meeting.
Yeah, I would hope that maybe the first meeting would be a good time to see that. That gives you a whole month. More than a month. So, any other questions from the public or the directors?
And then on the metering from the 3 trunks, we're not really gonna have good data for that until we have people back for the season. Because
Yeah.
those meters were just installed.
That's one of the, and that's true, that's kind of a longer issue.
It's funny, Roy just mentioned to me kind of the operational impacts that happen in the summer. Flows go from 100
Yeah.
to 60 to 30.
Yeah.
We're 30, and so, and especially the lower flows make it harder. You know? If it was, especially real low, if it was 150 to 100, it's not so bad, but
Right.
100 to 60 to 30 over a 6-week period,
Yeah.
you can handle it, no problem, but it's just, it's always got to stay on your toes, and there is no autopilot button up there, you know, because it just, those really low flows are just tricky to deal with. And we're at the low flow periods right now, 30,000 gallons.
30,000 gallons a day, 32, 33. I was telling Jay, I prefer to have 1 million gallons a day.
No, I
The
get it.
wastewater's working like the weather in Borrego. It's
Yeah.
extreme cold and extreme hot.
Yeah.
So I'm from 150 to 100 to 50 to 30 in a small range. Like in May, I start dropping. So I gotta be playing with my time operations to make everything work, so I'm not gonna be in violation. That's why, well, I know what, if you give me 1 million a day, I'm gonna be happy. I'll make it work, because then my chart is not so, not spiky, really high. So that's why I'm like, I have to make it work,
I'll start flushing twice, I'll stop.
Oh, my. All right, I think we're ready for the next topic, Greg. The TDS, I think.
Okay, cool. Let's talk TDS. Let's talk salt. So this is one of the regional board mandated studies that we're working on. The regional board has asked us to evaluate different ways of reducing the salt or TDS load into the groundwater basin, particularly from wastewater. Now, again, Roy's not sitting at the plant with bags of salt and adding it to the wastewater that's going into the ground. That's not at all what's happening. It's when you serve people potable water, it has a certain TDS, and actually the drinking water out in Borrego is really nice, low TDS. But what has to happen, and it's no fault of anybody, is that the concentration of salt or TDS increases from potable water to the wastewater treatment plant. And that goes up by a few hundred milligrams per liter, and that's completely normal. But the regional board still wants to investigate how Borrego can reduce that concentration of TDS in its wastewater effluent. So there's multiple prongs to this approach. One of them is just monitoring. What is the TDS of the groundwater? What is the TDS of the wastewater treatment plant effluent? The regional board has required some quarterly reporting, so we're helping. Roy's been doing this for a while now. We are helping Roy develop and submit some quarterly reports based on our conversation with the regional board. They wanted to see some trending of TDS in the effluent and in the groundwater. So we're coordinating between Roy and the regional board on that. That'll be ongoing for a while. The board has also asked us to look at Borrego's FOG program. Fats, Oils, and Grease is the acronym, FOG. So Borrego has a FOG program that limits the discharge of FOG into the sewer. This stuff can be pretty nasty on your collection system. Thinking about a clogged artery in your body, that the discharge of that stuff into the sewer system clogs pipes and can kind of wreak havoc on some of the equipment in the treatment plant. So it makes sense to have a FOG program to limit the discharge of that FOG into the sewer. Now, the board has asked us to look at that FOG program as another way of limiting TDS discharge into the sewer. And so we've taken the FOG program and are going to add some suggestions to make changes to that FOG program to also include a limit on TDS. So we're working on that right now, and Jeff will have a conversation with you as to what is an appropriate limit. Does that even make sense? Does the district have the ability to enforce that? It looks like from our analysis that they do. But that FOG program will be updated and submitted to the regional board for their review. We've also been mandated to determine if water softeners are used at homes in Borrego. So water softeners, typical home water softeners, they remove hardness ions from people's potable water. But the treatment equipment that's used to do that requires the addition of salt. So folks will go buy bags of salt, and when you have to regenerate your water softener, you dump a bag of salt into the water softener system, and that salty brine gets discharged into the sewer, makes its way to the treatment plant and out in the effluent. So the regional board has asked us to investigate the prevalence of water softeners in basically the collection system. So we've developed a mailer questionnaire survey that's going to be sent out to Borrego customers that'll help us determine the frequency and basically the intensity of water softener use. And I think what will come from that is, are water softeners a problem? When I say a problem, are they a significant source of TDS in Borrego's wastewater? And if so, can we develop a program to remove those water softeners? And Jeff, looking at, I think it was Borrego's municipal code, I believe that water softeners are outlawed, flat out outlawed in Borrego. But I would imagine.
No. Yeah, no.
No,
Yeah, not us.
we don't.
I thought it was only someplace up by Pasadena outlawed water softeners, but no.
Okay.
We're unincorporated, so it would have to be a county.
Yeah.
Okay, so I maybe misread something, so I apologize. So, but that said, if we find that there are a significant number of users of these types of water softeners, then Borrego can move forward with developing a program to help exchange them for alternative softeners that wouldn't be discharging salt to the collection system.
But the industry has evolved, the water softener industry, and they created a portable exchange process to where Greg described how the traditional softener works. You got your brine tank that you fill with salt, and that's a saline solution. It's backwashed into the water softeners, and then to recharge the beads. So now these beads are covered with salt again, so they can exchange sodium for calcium or magnesium to soften the water as it goes forward. So you're stripping off the calcium and magnesium that these beads have absorbed, and they're now coated with salt again, so they can start to exchange sodium for calcium and magnesium, so they can actually soften the water. So that's where the salt comes from recharging the beads, the ion exchange resin that's in these water softeners. And so this has been a big deal. So for the industry to survive, literally, they had to come up with a solution. A solution to dumping salt into the sewer because, like I say, I forget the name of the agency, but it was a big deal, 20 years ago, a big battle to outlaw water softeners right up there near Pasadena. And so, it's kind of the cumulative impact that dumping salt into the sewer system had. So the industry came up with portable exchange where you don't have a brine tank anymore. And the cylinders that have the ion exchange resin in it are removed. They bring out and put in a new one, then they take the old one to some regeneration facility where they can control the discharge. So, that is possible. So one potential outcome is, we outlaw, if that's the right word, but prohibit the self-regenerating water softeners, which are the ones that dump the salt into the system. The portable exchange units don't. They dump the salt into somebody else's system, right? But they're probably not connected to a sewer, wherever the big ion exchange regeneration facility for Culligan, for example, is. They have the ability to deal with the salt. So, that's one possibility is just no more self-regenerating water softeners, more of the portable exchange. And then Roy, God bless him, started thinking, well, it's probably the big guys are the potential source of the high TDS. So he went out and did some investigation at La Casa a week or so ago, and they have some good-sized water softeners there, obviously, for laundry and for the hotel itself, but the big ones that are in use now are the portable exchange style. La Casa has already evolved into the portable exchange unit. They had a couple self-regenerating units on site, but the story was that those weren't in use, so they might be, they might not be, who knows, but just in some of our initial investigations, La Casa's TDS did go up, like our source water's 330, 340, it was up to 6 something.
I went the first day that I went to La Casa, I opened one of their manholes, the whole sewer line, 804 TDS. And then the next day, 670 something. So I have a meter. I open the manhole and I put it in there. That's why I told Jeff, I'm gonna go investigate what kind of water softeners they have. And the ones that they have in the laundry and the kitchen, that's the ones that we're looking for. The ones that are self-contained tank, where the water goes in and out. Inside the tank, there is no pallets or nothing. That's what we're looking for. The ones on the two-story building, they do have them, but they say like, oh, we'll use them. But I was telling them, okay, should we believe them? And you don't know what to do that.
The data says elsewise.
Yeah.
800 TDS is coming from somewhere, right?
So, you heard all these, so you go out and then you're like, I sent Jeff the pictures and everything. And I mean, even at the mall, I went to Carmelita's, they have one too, and they use it, the one with the polys. I took a picture, I opened it, they just sent it to you. So, like I went to Kendall's, they have one with the stainless steel tanks. That's what we're looking for. Because what happened, Culligan, the company, they come down once a month, they remove those tanks, they take them to the shop, they regenerate and clean it, and then they bring them back again. So nothing goes inside our system. So that's what we're trying to slow down, or at least, we're trying to lower the number so that the regional board is not going to hit us where, hey, you know what, now you need a water treatment at the end of your wastewater plant. That can cost a lot of money. So we need to issue this problem, or try to slow it down. One question that I asked Jeff, okay, so if we can push them to get rid of the old one, are we going to give them some kind of credit? Because they can be like, you know what, no, I don't have the money right now to buy a new one.
It's a program we have to consider.
Like maybe it will be cheaper for us to help them a little bit at the beginning to lower it down than try to put a water treatment at the wastewater plant. It's just one of those things that we have to be able to balance these and come up with the highest usage ones that are dumping more TDS into the wastewater. Because our water is only 300, which is perfect. Coming out of the well, TDS is between 280 and 300.
Is that
That's a good number.
good number?
Yeah.
Okay.
So the average, Roy? Yeah. For the source water.
Okay.
Because I test the well number 12 and 11 every month for TDS, and that's it. I have a history for the last 5 years.
So another interesting fun little project.
Yes.
Digging into the water softener impacts and where else the TDS could be coming from, but water softeners are typically the culprit.
And like Greg was saying, we have the fog program where I go and check the grease traps too.
Right.
That can contribute too. I'm not 100%, like all the grease that is there, that eventually they scoop it and clean it, but some of that grease, it won't make it through our system. Because I can see it on my oxidation dish, you can see like clouds of grease. So it's making it all the way. So it's just one of those things that, we have to nail it down where we're not gonna be able to get rid of all the grease, but maybe we have to improve the program that we have where instead of me going like, hey, you know what, your grease trap is dirty, I'm gonna come back tomorrow, you have to clean it. You know what, your grease trap is dirty, I'm gonna give you a citation. Maybe they're gonna change. It's usually what helps.
Isn't that part of the, food inspection too? I mean, when they come in and do the health department?
Yeah.
I'm not even sure if they open those grease traps or not.
They don't?
No. I mean, I take pictures every month that I go, I take pictures, and again, it's always the same people. It's like, you go like, I was gonna clean it yesterday, but I got busy. And we're like, yeah, but if you keep a program, we're not supposed to be.
It won't be a big deal. Do we have to have some sort of power to issue a citation?
I think we have all that,
We
yeah.
just fine them? Interesting.
Roy, you said you check wells 11 and 12, was it, every month for
TDS, the average is between 280 and 300.
And where are those wells?
Well 12 is by Borrego Valley Road,
Uh-huh.
which is the one that supplies the water to the whole Ramsey. And I take that one because that one supplies the whole Ramsey, and then Ramsey discharges all the water to the wastewater. And then the other one is well 11, which supplies a lot of the homes here, and then supplies the discharge into the wastewater. And that's part of the permit that we have in the wastewater.
Okay. Yeah. Any other questions before we move on? Okay, Greg, go forward.
Any other questions?
Oh, look, we got a question.
Yeah, so this is the Regional Water Quality Control Board requests. This is fabulous, all the work we're doing. But if you take a step back, in Borrego, an order of magnitude more effluent equivalent comes from septic tanks and out of the control of the wastewater treatment plant. To what extent is the Regional Water Quality Control Board looking to us to look at all of effluent or recharge and not just the wastewater treatment plant?
That's a good question. So my understanding is they're not. They're just looking at the wastewater treatment plant and those homes and businesses that are connected to the wastewater treatment plant. But your point's valid. This doesn't consider all the TDS, all the nitrogen, all of everything else that's being discharged into the same groundwater basin from septic tanks. The regional board in this TDS study has asked us to also provide some alternative ways of reducing TDS. And I'm not sure if it's specifically in the effluent of the wastewater treatment plant, or I'll have to go back and look at the language. It may be just in general how to reduce TDS discharge to the groundwater basin. And that would be a potential suggestion, is to start looking at septic tanks and or homes with or businesses with on septic and thinking about getting them to the treatment plant, and also implementing some other TDS reduction at those facilities, whether that be water softeners or updates to the fog program. But yeah, that's a good point.
I think Steve is going to chime in on what our authority is to create or force changes on water treatment. Is that where you came, Steve? I see you're on my screen.
I just thought there might be a question, but that's something we'd have to look into, the extent of your authority. It depends on what you're looking at. I mean, I expect that you'd be allowed to put restrictions through an ordinance on use of those water softeners to the extent that there are some of the old variety that are causing issues. I expect the district could regulate that and impose rules and regulations related to that. Whether or not you have authority to regulate discharges to septic or control that in any way, I'm a little more hesitant to think you would have authority to do that, but I could look into that if the board wanted me to.
What about the fog situation in businesses such as restaurants that have grease traps and that they aren't caring for properly?
Yeah, Madam President, you already have regulations related to that, and I'm confident you have that authority. They're tying into your system, and if you're just going to potentially expand those to regulate TDS inputs as well as everything else that you already regulate, I'm sure that would be fine.
Thank you.
And I think from a practical perspective, it's time to start doing that, right, Roy? And here's we can tie it into something.
The more we're regulated, the more we need to pass those regulations.
We can tie it into some work that Roy's got planned. We're gonna video the force main or the town center sewer lines again. Run a video down, and if we see what we saw in the past with the grease rings coming in, the laterals coming into our sewer lines, and we see evidence of grease down. So we'll just do it. I mean, we've done it before, but it's time. We'll just take pictures and follow up and issue citations if we have to. Be jerks about it, right? Tries not to be, but it's time.
So could that be another video we put on our website? And Tammy could find music to go with it.
You know what? Now you're saying that, I was talking with Indy, Curtis, and all at once. You know, like we're changing the rules, and now I'm gonna start putting the grease traps on the webpage. He goes, "What do you mean?" Ooh, yeah, I mean, like, and then you go like, "Really? Are you serious?" I'm like, "Oh, you know, like, hey, you guys have to work with that." You know, like, it's just like, and I explained to him too, like, hey, when Jim Wormers did the center market, it took him what, literally 7 months before plugged their line. All the grease that was coming from the center market and Pavitos.
Wow.
It literally took like 6 months to plug this new line.
That's why their septics failed all the time.
Yeah. And then again, you know, like, you go over there, and then again, the first thing is you know, like, they act like, oh, let me ask, who's supposed to clean that? You're like, I don't care. It's like somebody has to clean it, you know.
Well, probably so too. Not
And
just
public,
them.
yeah.
Well, I think, boy, we have to consider that idea. Shame videos.
I mean, you know, and you know, even we even talked to Susan. You know, like we used to have problems with the elementary school a year and a half ago where nobody wanted to clean it, and like, and then they were blaming like, hey, you know what? Our sewer's plugged. And we're like, yeah, that's because you don't do your maintenance. That's gonna happen. So we went and talked to Mark, the principal. We had a meeting, Jeff and I, and then we went back and forth. I went and explained it to him. After that, they got into a program. They have a sheet where they force all the people that work in the kitchen, they rotate. One cleaner 1 week, and I mean, like, every time I go over there, I put congratulations, I put a happy face, you're doing a good job. I go over there, and then now they're saying, like, you know what, literally, it takes like 5 minutes.
Right, because they're staying on top of it.
And then, I mean, they don't have any problems. But again, you know, sometimes it's hard for me to tell somebody, owner of a restaurant, this is the way you should do it. They think like, who you are.
Right was gonna start his own grease trap.
When they ask that, you say, I'm the guy that cleans it up at the other end, so.
Yeah.
So bring it back to him. There you go. Here's your grease back.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's right.
The grease bird in the parking lot.
Anyway, yeah, that's interesting. I think we should start looking at ways that we can.
Isn't there commercial companies that will do that service?
Yeah, the only problem is with the commercial companies, it's not like they don't want to come every week. You know, like Casa del Zorro has like big pits, and they come like every 3 months. And then, you know, by the time 3 months come, they're already, it's a mess. they're dirty.
I can't even imagine.
And I mean, like, you know, you open them and and then you ask them, they go like, whoa, we're waiting for the company to come. So that's why when the
So they need to step up how often they.
You know, when the county inspector comes down and they wanna, in a new building, they wanna do that, I always go like, you know what, no, can we just make it simple? Just like a small box where they'll keep it up instead of putting under the ground where they like 4 feet deep.
And they can't see.
And it's really hard. I mean, Kirsten's having like that too. Whenever they redeed the whole building, well, the county inspector make them put those, they're like 4 feet deep. And I used to have problems with him too, like, hey, you need to clean your bootstrap. Oh, I'm busy. And we're like, yeah, I'm busy too, but I'm here. Just like, you know, like, if we're all gonna make excuses, well, I'm not gonna do my job too. I'm busy.
We gotta hit them on the wall to make them compliant.
Yeah, I like that idea. Well, and Shane pictures us. There's nothing like social media that gets people attention. All right. Okay. On to the next subject, Greg.
Well, let me make one last point. So I was referencing a Borrego municipal code.
Here with grease traps. Okay.
Yeah. So I was referencing earlier what I thought I read was as a Borrego municipal code. I was actually reading the Borrego 2018 sewer system master plan. Section 7 of that has language on what can and can't be discharged to the sewer, and section 7.4.3 says water softener or brine. The discharge of water softener or brine waste is prohibited. So there's some language there, and that may come from a county standard, as somebody mentioned, but that language does exist in a Borrego document.
And that's the community master plan?
That's the sewer system master plan. I'm looking at the 2018 version.
We have one?
Oh, okay.
That doesn't cover anybody that's not on sewer.
Okay.
Okay. So shall we move on to the nitrogen study now? Okay, great. So the nitrogen study, again, is a regional board mandated study that's basically the same as the TDS study, except we're looking at nitrogen. And again, nitrogen, again, Roy is not adding bags of nitrogen to the wastewater treatment plant effluent, right? Nitrogen's something that we humans add to potable water in our waste, and that nitrogen is removed at the wastewater treatment plants. And again, I'll say this again, Roy does a hell of a job removing at his treatment plant, considering his plant is not set up to specifically remove nitrogen. So thank you, Roy, for doing a good job and being flexible with how you operate that plant. Because, yeah. So, again, the regional board is having us evaluate, first of all, how much nitrogen is being discharged by the wastewater treatment plant into the groundwater, and we've already begun some of that work in kind of previous studies, so we've got a good handle on that. They also want us to look at ways to help reduce that. Different alternatives for nitrogen removal at the plant beyond what Roy is already doing. So, you know, we believe that what Roy's doing today, you know, we talked about flows and loads into the plant today, ranging from, 30,000 to 100,000 gallons per day. But I think Roy would be hard pressed to achieve the same level of nitrogen removal if the flow and load to the plant were much greater than 100,000 gallons per day. So the regional board wants to know what would need to be added to the plant to help meet a hypothetical nitrogen discharge limit of 10 milligrams per liter. So we're evaluating alternative projects that would help achieve that discharge limit. So we're looking at modifying Roy's oxidage to add some explicit nitrogen removal capacity to that oxidage. We're looking at adding a denitrification filter. That technology basically would take effluent from the ox ditch and run it through a filter that would help remove the nitrate and thus reduce the overall nitrogen concentration in the effluent. And then the other alternative that we're looking at is basically a new activated sludge process that would replace Roy's ox ditch. And that new process would have built into it some explicit nitrogen removal capacity, all of which would get the effluent nitrogen concentration down below 10 milligrams per liter. So the board wants to know, of these alternatives, or for these alternatives, what is ultimately the dollar per pound of nitrogen removed number? And I think they're going to take a look at that and decide whether or not that number in combination with the actual monitoring well numbers that we're developing right now. So let me take a little sidebar here. So the one thing that we're doing at the treatment plant is evaluating nitrogen removal technology and their costs. The other side of the equation is evaluating the current impacts of the effluent discharge on groundwater nitrogen concentrations. And part of doing that is implementing this whole monitoring well network and evaluating the data. I think that data is going to start rolling in now as those wells are completed, so we can say, hey, look, as of today, we're discharging so many pounds of nitrogen into the groundwater, and it's having this effect on the groundwater quality. And so I think the board wants to look at both sides of the equation. What is the current impact? Is it significant? And if it is, what is the cost of reducing that impact by implementing one of the projects that we're outlining in basically the feasibility analysis. So today the update is we're starting to develop some more refined costs on each of those alternatives and developing the report that'll be submitted to the regional board so they can evaluate our analysis. And then, as I mentioned, the groundwater monitoring analysis is going to start beginning in earnest now that the monitoring wells are approaching completion. So we can actually look at the data and determine what sort of impacts we're seeing on the groundwater basin. So I know that was kind of a high-level description of what we're doing on the nitrogen study. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Go ahead, Diane.
Should there be some attention paid now to the possibility of an additional golf course being put in up at Rams Hill, which would create a lot of nitrates from the fertilizers, right?
Yeah, that's another fair point. It's kind of in line with the septic systems, right? As other contributors to things that you don't want in the groundwater. So yes, I think that probably ought to be mentioned in our report, just for the sake of completeness, right? Here's the wastewater treatment plant, and it's one of potentially several dischargers of nitrogen in the groundwater basin. And what will happen, just like the TDS study, is the regional board will probably ask us to look at some maybe other alternative ways of reducing nitrogen discharge in the groundwater beyond what's happening at the wastewater treatment plant.
Right, because that won't affect the wastewater treatment plant. It would potentially groundwater.
Right.
Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, there's probably some overall things of interest in terms of discharge. It doesn't.
Plus all the septic tank discharge, right? That's a direct discharge of nitrogen in the groundwater.
Right. So when are you, is this something that will take a while longer than what we're talking about for the EDU report?
Yes, these are, yes, both so the EDU analysis is kind of a shorter project that, as we September-ish time frame. These TDS and nitrogen studies are longer term. They're 2-phase projects. The first one is basically doing the analysis, coming up with costs, and then you give that to the regional board and then come up with an implementation plan on how you're going to execute the recommendations in the analysis. So the TDS project, the study is in the second phase where we're executing things. That's why we're developing ways of improving the fog program while we're trying to eliminate or determine the presence of water softeners. That's an execution part. The the nitrogen study is in phase 1 where we're doing the evaluation and quantifying the problem.
And we would determine the best possible process for cost per pound before you present it to the regional water.
Yeah, so right, so we're developing costs for 3 alternatives, and those will be presented to the board in combination with some of the groundwater monitoring data. So, I guess in our report we'll say if we have to implement some additional treatment at the wastewater treatment plant, then we would recommend doing alternative X. But if there's no real driver for that, meaning we're not seeing an impact on the current discharge of nitrogen in the groundwater, then we can make the argument that those projects aren't really needed.
Okay.
Whether the regional board will entertain that argument, I'm not sure yet. I would hope that they would, but because otherwise, why are we going through the exercise of determining the current impact?
So I'm curious, how familiar is the regional board with Borrego Springs and our setting? And do you know, have they ever come here?
They come once a year. She
Okay.
comes once a year, she walks through the whole wastewater plant, and I explain the way it works, everything, she takes pictures, and then she sends me a report. Like if there's something that we're missing or something that has to be updated. Like last year she didn't came, but we did like a video and I sent it to her, but she comes every year.
Nice.
Really nice.
Yeah. Good.
And they if we have, they just don't like I was telling Jeff, they don't like you lying. If I have a leak or anything, you have to report it. Hey, you know what? This is what happens. They're okay with it. They just want to make sure like you know it, and then what you doing to solve the problem. It's like what Greg is doing right now. Hey, you know what? His option is going to be late. He needed an oxygen zone to lower the levels, but if I keep lowering the levels, the other option is like, oh, they'll need to do nothing.
Right.
But if we start getting more homes and more flow, they can be, hey, wait a minute. Now you're getting more flow. Now we need to go back to whatever plan. But again, we don't know. It's how they put the whole plan together.
Are those reports on the website, or could you send me one? I'd just like to see what one looks like.
I can send you one.
Thank you.
They're online too.
Online with the regional.
Yeah, it's I'm gonna have to give you a code.
We'll look for those.
What happened? Like I have to report. It's called California. It's a web page they just did. So every month I have to report to the web page. Yeah, and then I have my own login password and everything. So I log it in, and then what they do, like because before I used to scan it and send it to her, and then about 2 years ago they changed it. Now everybody has to report to that page, and then they get the reports on the page. And the good thing is that whenever you report to the page, they give you a copy that this day, this time, you submit your report. So I always print one and attach it to my whole report. So, because it happens, like, yeah, so, hey, it happens before where she called me, hey, you know what, I'm missing your report, you never sent it to me, and we're like, what are you talking about? You're like, hey, it happens. It's just one of those things that, and you can forget too. Like you do so many things that you were like, did I see my report? Like,
So you have proof for yourself too.
Right.
Yeah. Wow. Okay.
I'll send you one.
Thank you.
So where are we at? So
Yeah, was that it?
this is a long process then, Greg.
Yeah, this is, yes, so we need to collect enough data. I can do the analysis for the different treatment alternatives relatively quickly, and that's what we're doing. But actually compiling the groundwater monitoring data, that just takes time.
Okay.
So we're working on that, compiling that data, and then we'll present that to the board in a way that they'd like to see it. And that's also going to be ongoing, right? So the board, let's just take this back, because this project is essentially the nitrogen version of the same TDS project, right? So we're further along in the TDS project. They want to continue to see groundwater monitoring data even after you execute some of your, we'll call them initiatives, like to reduce TDS. They want to see if what you've done has made any difference on the groundwater quality. So the same thing will be done for the nitrogen studies. Once we say, hey, here's our plan, and they'll say, okay, go ahead and execute that plan. We'll execute that plan, but the whole time we're going to be monitoring the groundwater for different nitrogen species to see if what we've done is actually making a difference. So that's a longer term project as well.
Thank you, Greg. Do we have any other questions? Oh, Tammy.
Thanks. Hey, Greg, I believe you're doing another body of work for us too, which is an so tell me if I'm right, an evaluation of the wastewater treatment plant and fixing the bottlenecks such that it reaches the design goal of being a 250,000 gallons per day plant. It's currently a $100,000 gallon per day, not dollar, gallon per day plant. And the report that you did a year or two ago identified two bottlenecks, nitrogen, which you've talked about extensively now, but then a second bottleneck in the equalization basin. And I believe that we have asked you, and maybe I just need to get on the same page with what you think we've asked you to do, that you're also doing an evaluation of resolving a second bottleneck, the second bottleneck in the plant, which is the equalization basin, which would then make the plant reach its original design capacity goal. Am I right?
Yeah, that's accurate. So let me give some context on that. So yes, the original capacity study looked at capacities of the individual unit processes within the treatment plant as a whole. And the logic is that those unit processes work, individually, but the plant can't function if one of them doesn't work, right? If you take one of those, you knock that link out of the chain, the whole wastewater treatment plant does not work. So we looked at the capacities for each of those and converted their capacity. Some of the unit processes their capacities dictated by flow, and others, the capacities of them are dictated by load, like BOD load or nitrogen load. So we looked at the individual process capacities, the current flow and load to those processes, and then converted those capacities into basically an EDU capacity, or remaining EDU, meaning how many more EDU could you connect to the wastewater treatment plant before you exceed the capacity of any of the individual unit processes. And the analysis indicated that the first two bottlenecks at the treatment plant were its nitrogen removal capacity and the capacity of the equalization basin. And again, I could talk more on nitrogen, but I think the question is now looking at equalization. And our analysis, let me expand on that. Our analysis looked at the original design criteria. So whoever designed the plant and the equalization basin said, this equalization basin of 120-some thousand gallons, rough numbers, would give you roughly 12 hours of equalization. Now, is that equalization vital to the treatment plant achieving the requirements of the treatment plant? in terms of treated effluent quality? And the shorter answer is not necessarily. The EQ basin there, because it's where it's located in the process, is really valuable in helping the performance of downstream unit processes. So if you have some equalization in your plant, it provides you a time buffer for downstream processes. It doesn't really help anything with the upstream processes. It's really all for downstream stuff. So the plant, because of where the EQ is, that EQ would really benefit the treatment of like the filter process or a disinfection process. But those aren't used at the plant today, right? So that EQ, as it's being used today, and Roy can tell me to go pound sand if I'm inaccurate on this, but the EQ is basically a fat spot in the pipe that helps him meter out treated effluent to the percolation basins. It would allow Roy to accumulate flow and store it on site while he maybe maintains something downstream. And it basically buys you time. And the original intent was that EQ basin would buy you 12 hours. And therefore we said the capacity of that basin, the intent was to buy you 12 hours. So if you increase flow by adding more and more EDU, beyond a certain point, you're going to start to get less than 12 hours. And therefore the EQ basin was then under capacity at that point. Now, does that mean you're not going to meet your permit? No, right? It just means that you have less buffer, less time to make repairs to those downstream processes. So in terms of bottlenecks, I think this one's not super vital that you expand it. Meaning, I think that you can get away with less storage time, less equalization time, and still meet discharge permits as they're laid out today. Now, I will say that if the district added a treatment process downstream of the EQ basin, like a filter or a D-night filter, that those processes would benefit from having that equalization time. And the more you shrink down that equalization time, the less benefit you'd be providing. And in some cases, that might impact the treated effluent quality. But as the plant's operated today, it's not directly impacting the plant's ability to meet permit. I hope that answers the question.
Partially. We want to know what it takes to have the plant operate, not today, but at the 250,000 gallons per day design goal. So I'm not as interested in, I know it's working, I know our plant's working today, that's great. It's more like, would it work at 250,000 gallons per day if that happened tomorrow? And we know that it would not work for a nitrogen removal requirement. Would it work for the equalization basin needs? Or I'm almost hearing like we don't have a blockage with the equalization basin if tomorrow our plant went to 250,000 gallons per day. Is that a fair assumption?
That's a fair assumption. So the way that the EQ, what it's providing you to, I'm going to talk about today and then I'll talk about the future. Because the volume is set at 120,000 gallons, your flow today let's say 60,000 gallons. That would give you 48 hours of storage. And what you do with that storage is really up to what Roy needs, right? He may not be using all that time to do anything today, but he could use 48 hours if he needed to service something downstream. Now, fast forward to the future, if the flow goes up to 200,000 gallons per day, I know it's less than 250, but I'm just using round numbers so I can do the math. If you have a 200,000 gallon per day flow into a 100,000 gallon tank, then you have 12 hours of storage. So the storage time is reduced, meaning Roy's ability to perform whatever sort of maintenance he needs to do downstream of the EQ basin is shortened. And there's some level of risk involved in shortening that time down to some smaller and smaller number. I don't think there's anything downstream, and Roy, correct me if I'm wrong, that would take more than 12 hours to repair, that you would need more than 12 hours of storage in that EQ tank?
It all depends, basically, Greg, like, if we're talking about my, oxidation ditch, my brushes went out, it may gonna be more than 24 hours.
So would you use that, Roy, would you use that EQ tank for emergency storage if your brushes went out?
Yeah,
Okay. So, all right, that's good information. So Roy is using it for basically to prevent from discharging off-spec water that would not meet permit. If something were to happen to the ox ditch, for example, he's saying the brushes malfunctioned or broke, it would take him at least 24 hours to make that repair and to get back into compliance. And therefore, Roy, you would really benefit from having at least 24 hours of storage at the plant.
yeah,
So, okay, and that would be an argument for expanding the EQ capacity up to 250,000 gallons, up from its current 120,000 gallons.
Okay.
So, hey, Greg, I have a question for you. So let's say now we're talking about the big number, the 250,000 gallons a day, which the plant it was set to work. So if we reach that, is the regional board gonna be like, wait a minute, now you are max, you need to do something different than wastewater?
The regional board is going to say when you get up to, I forget the number, I think it's like 80% of your design flow capacity, they want to see that you are making progress toward it. What do you do to expand, right? You need to be planning for that.
Average monthly flows, I do believe.
Yeah, that sounds right.
Average flow gets to 200,000 gallons a day. We need to submit a plan on how we're going to expand the plant. Average, not one day, not 3 days, but average monthly flow.
Thanks, Greg. Jeff, I think that the ad hoc on the wastewater treatment plant needs to have a little conversation with Greg and risk analysis on whether it's, so the original for the board, it was $600,000 to expand, DDOC's original estimate was $600,000 to expand the EQ basin, yesterday's dollars. And so I think the wastewater treatment plant ad hoc needs to have a little powwow about balancing risk of more than 24 hours and taking on a $600,000 project, all with the goal of adding capacity to the wastewater treatment plant, which is one of the things that T2 has asked for. And we are, well, more's coming on that. But anyway, my takeaway from this, Jeff, is I think that we need to explore this a little bit more with Greg and just come up with a recommendation to present to the board.
That's true with all these studies, you're right, yep.
I don't see a wastewater treatment plant ad hoc. Is it finance?
Or is it?
Or operations and infrastructure? I don't see an ad hoc.
There's one that
I was on it. I remember being on it because we did that huge study that Greg talked about.
Jessica thinks it's finance, Tammy.
I have the meeting agenda from February 1st, and it has the ADU stuff on it.
But I think we had one that was a wastewater treatment plant specifically. But then we thought after, at some point, maybe we dropped it because it was completed some test.
There has been a time kind of parallel to the T2 discussions, and then developers policy that Tammy and I and Jeff have had a lot of discussions about the EDU issue in particular, but you know, the wastewater treatment plant and the roadblocks have been described. And I don't know if we were formally a committee, but we have had a lot of discussions about this issue.
There is an operations and infrastructure group.
Yeah, that's a standing.
Developers agreement, ad hoc.
You know, so probably, you know, the best thing to do, like, come up with the EDU per gallons, and then after that, you move into expand into the wastewater. Maybe, you know, maybe with the number that, I don't know what number you guys are gonna come up for EDU, maybe we don't even have to expand.
Is the
I mean, I don't know, you know, it's just that
Right.
the coin is still up in the air.
No,
We don't know.
absolutely, but we're trying to plan for the potential of 250,000 gallons a day. So with the developers, I mean, is the developers agreement committee also working on issues and wastewater treatment plan, or is that totally separate?
No, we have been. We've had
So
discussions along those
so
lines.
does the developers agreement committee work for all of this, or do we need to create a separate committee? I mean, I'm fine with putting the developers agreement as being also the wastewater treatment plan and EDU issues, because that seems like it all,
You know,
all
ties together.
yeah. Okay, we're still on, we're still on.
Okay.
You're
Okay, thanks.
under, we'll call it the developers agreement committee.
Okay, thanks. And I see Kathy Milky. I don't know if I can see the chats easily. She wants to speak once the directors are done. Thank you.
Thanks, Tammy.
And thanks, Greg.
You bet.
Any other directors? Gina?
I think I'm jumping back to the TDS and the water softeners. And I think we discussed maybe for the fog kind of implementing, but if truly our sewer system master plan says that softeners, you know, the release is not allowed, do we at least start an education program with the commercial folks that have the water softeners?
What is our sewer system master plan from 2018?
You know, I was here at the time, it's not ringing a bell to me, which doesn't mean anything, I'm not saying it didn't happen, but
Not really, but I have a copy. Diana has a copy too. We just sent it to Greg and Nakara because they're working on these, and that's what they brought up.
Could you send it to the board? I would sure like to. I
Right,
didn't
and I guess,
know anything about it. I mean, I was elected in 2018, but I don't remember anything about
right,
it.
it's the same thing as the requirements we have for fog, or it doesn't have no teeth that would allow.
It would be good to read all of that and know.
To have an understanding.
Right. So
Okay.
if we could all get a copy of that, that would be great. But yeah, I think we should, if there are things that we can implement, and of course we want to hear from Dudek's and Greg's study, so we can, you know, step it up if there is something in we already have a policy, that would be really helpful.
Right, and if
So,
it's enforceable. Right?
Yes, absolutely. Good point, Gina, thank you.
I vaguely remember a discussion about a policy, and it was kind of elevated to the surface with the pictures that were posted from Calico's with draining the sausage over the toilet bowl, and that kind of initiated.
I think that made a lot of people quite ill.
just the term master plan is what's.
That was the power.
I don't remember the master plan, I remember redoing our fog program and
And
talking about all these issues, I just don't remember the
Yeah.
word master plan, because
And
that means something totally different, but.
That was the power of social media, again.
And a disgruntled employee.
Again, the power of social media for disgruntled, for getting something done. Anyway, any other questions from the directors? All right, Kathy, your turn.
Thanks. Yeah, I wanted to speak to an item that Diane mentioned, which was about nitrates. And I just wanted to let you know that according to the most recent report I could find on the Water Master website, there's no nitrogen problem at Rams Hill. That's it's not a contaminant present in our wells at a significant level. And so I wanted you to know that as you're thinking about wastewater treatment plant and septic systems and things like that, because it seems like that is the nitrogen driver, perhaps, based on the data that I've seen.
Right, yeah, you're very correct. And also, one of the reasons we have water quality monitoring at the wells is so that we can determine if there's any changes that require attention. So, but that's separate from the wastewater treatment plant for sure. Any other questions or comments for Greg, or in general?
Thanks, Greg.
Really appreciate your time, Greg. Thank you very much for your report.
Of course, anytime, and any questions, probably funnel those to Jeff, and he'll get them directed to me.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Have a good day.
Thank you.
Bye.
Okay. And now, yeah, lots of good stuff to chew on there, literally. 2C is the Borrego Springs Subbasin Water Master Report.
Well, as you know, there was a meeting
Yes.
on July, I believe, the 13th, Thursday the 13th, just a couple days after our meeting. Wasn't really anything of substance that was taken action on. There was yet another lengthy discussion about how the water quality optimization plan might integrate itself into the 5-year update. I know that there's been some confusion about whether that would happen after the update or during the update. It is my recollection of the last discussion was that it would happen during the update. It would be a portion of the update. In fact, Andy will have kind of a scoping memorandum presented to us at our September meeting. But I want to remind everybody that we've had identified some significant data gaps in the water quality monitoring program. Those gaps are being filled as we speak, I think, between Tyler Billick, the BWD, and John Peterson's community group, that I think collectively there's been close to 20 wells identified as potential candidates to fill those data gaps, none of which have been sampled yet, none of which have been analyzed. I mean, I want people to understand that it is moving forward. There is nothing currently that would, lead us to believe that there's a pending water quality crisis here in the basin. And whether it begins in 2024 prior to the 5-year update or it was completed shortly after the update, it's okay. I mean, it is moving forward. We are filling those data gaps, but yet they have not been sampled or analyzed yet. And currently, there is nothing basin-wide, not the individual concerns about the T2 wells that are not potable because of arsenic, or the Fortner well as an example, which across the board does not meet standards for potable water. But those, in my mind, seem somewhat isolated when you look at the basin as a whole. The BWD wells are all in really good shape, but it is going to happen. So everybody take a breath. It is going to happen, and I look forward to hearing Andy's report on how it will integrate itself into the 5-year update.
And does there need to be contingency plans for, in case there is an issue, or does that develop when an issue comes up?
I think that there will be a plan and a policy developed before an issue comes up.
And that would be part of the 5-year plan?
And it is my understanding that all becomes part of the 5-year update.
And that's your...
Well, that's kind of it. That was kind of the big, I mean, in terms of interest to this board, that kind of seemed to rise to the top of the list. There was an announcement that John Peterson was now a member of the TAC.
Which is very nice.
I put forward for the September agenda a discussion about providing the community director an opportunity to have a TAC member. Director Smith spoke up instantly and said that the judgment doesn't provide for that. And he is correct, the judgment currently doesn't provide for that, but that doesn't mean that we can't have a discussion whether the community rep should have a TAC member or not.
Would that have to be an amendment to the judgment then?
Steve, can you answer that? I mean, the judge can certainly agree to appoint someone, but I'm going to assume that would require ultimately an amendment.
I believe so. It probably would require an amendment, but the judge has authority to do that.
Okay. So he could, okay, I'm not gonna go there. I was just thinking about the Pandora box thing. But, okay, so I think that's a great thing. I don't know why, I don't know why it was overlooked in the past. I know there was a reason and I can't remember what it is. Was it cost? I don't know.
Well, no, I mean, I think when the stipulated agreement was negotiated, the thought was that anyone that holds BPA, any pumper in the basin holding a BPA could as a TAC member.
Right.
Personally, I think it was an oversight not to specifically accommodate the community member. I mean, I don't think it was deliberately to exclude him. It might have been in some people's mind, but it wasn't in mine.
I kind of remember it being skated over, but I don't remember the issues. But I think it's a great idea to put that potential back in.
I do too.
Go ahead, Diane.
So with the August water master meeting being canceled,
yeah.
I can't remember, was the intention in July to have one in August? I can't remember.
No,
okay, it was always, no. Anyway, the fact that it's canceled means that the judges' conference will happen with basically no input from the water master board.
When is the next conference?
August 27th, I
it's coming
think.
up.
Yeah. So for us, we can submit or ask Steve to submit any issues that we have, right? But and yeah, that would be brought up at the judges' conference. But the board, the water master board as a whole, won't be able to direct Markman about what you want to say.
We never have. It's always been left up to him. That's true.
And he's not even at all the meetings.
Okay. I mean, given that he's been admonished twice, to submit things in a timely fashion, it would be interesting to see if he sends anything out. He's never even CC'd the board on what was submitted to the court.
One more question.
Yeah, go ahead.
And I think the other item that was discussed is maybe anytime there's use of staff resources.
Let me back up then a little bit. So I don't know who all Shannon Smith sent his letter to. You might have seen it. He was suggesting that there should be a formal process for anyone requesting information. And so he has pursued that. And quite frankly, if there was an individual or a group requesting technical assistance or review by the water master, I don't have any issue with formalizing some sort of vetting process, whether it's legitimate or not. But what Shannon seems to want to do is to say anyone requesting information that may later be used in a technical fashion, go through this vetting process. And what that would mean is that if we do that, if UCI were to come to us at that point in time, then they would have to go through this vetting process. Anyone requesting data sets or anything from the water master, which they currently do, that would have to be vetted by the TAC. I think that's nonsensical.
And he's basing that on the fact that it costs
Is that
time?
It seems like it was a use of staff resources or time that kind of was.
I don't even think that that's it, because what he's proposing requires the use of staff time, requires the use
to determine whether
of the TAC to determine whether it's legitimate or not.
That's very true.
In some ways, in my mind, it feels like trying to find a way to circumvent what the board has already discussed and voted on. And which was that things like the UCI's request was logistical and not technical.
Yeah, Jim Bennett spoke forcefully
Yeah,
about that.
but in the way Shannon's presenting it now, that even at the time, if it's not technical, but the information gathered may be used later in a technical way, then it should be vetted. We've already talked about this twice.
Yeah.
We've already voted on it twice. So I'm uncomfortable in the way he's presenting it. Seems to be a way to circumvent what we've already decided.
Well, that wouldn't be surprising.
That's just what it is.
What was agreed on at the meeting? Then I missed that
In
part.
September, it will be on the agenda to talk about this.
A process, whether
Yeah.
it's needed or not. Will that
Well,
be part of the discussion?
I mean, whether it's technical, if in fact someone were to approach the water master and say,
Ask
hey,
for work to be done.
I have this idea or this question scientifically, let's collaborate on a project. Then I think it merits some vetting to occur to see if that request is legitimate or not, if the person really has some sort of real scientific standing, or if it's just some guy in a tinfoil hat. You know, I don't have any issue vetting people coming forward to ask the water master to participate or to analyze technical information. But if they are, then they do need some sort of vetting process. Like I say, I don't want the guy in the tinfoil hat generating a bunch of requests. We already have a policy in place for
information.
data.
Yeah.
And if the staff time exceeds $500, then they have to pay.
Was that brought up in this last discussion?
No, it hasn't been yet.
I think that is a legitimate.
Yeah.
The fact that there's already an existing process that you can use for that.
Yeah, but that's people just asking for a copy of a model, a particular data set, But the way that it's being presented now is that if that information would ultimately be used, to come up with.
But that's a separate thing later on.
Totally, I agree. So that's what the deal is with that. So that will be discussed in September.
That sounds pretty important.
Yeah, I mean, it does say in the agenda item, it says developing a policy surrounding third-party requests for water master resources. So it's really sort of a broad brush kind of definition.
Well, I said at the time, I said, if I were to ask to use the company car, what am I gonna have to go through?
Right.
How much paperwork am I gonna have to do to be able to get the keys to the company car?
And which costs more for the staff.
Yeah, I mean,
the data
my
set
mind,
or going through
setting
the process
this up-
of deciding whether you should give them the data set.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, they could request it through the Freedom of Information Act anyway. I mean, you can put up all the roadblocks you want to put up, but there's nothing that precludes somebody making a FOIA request. That's happened here at the district before.
Right. Well, hopefully we can all have our input.
Oh, we
Whether
will.
whether it will be listened to or not is another thing, but we will all be there for our input.
Dave will listen.
I know Dave will, and I hope others will too. It's still, there's still 5 people on the board, so. Anything else, Dave?
No, that's, that's it.
Anybody else's mind, is that it?
So Trey wants to
Yes.
enter into what
Yes,
happened, what is happening with the TAC.
Okay, yes,
I'm
Trey,
done.
we're ready for your tax report.
Thank you, President Tice. I am working with the TAC on the airborne electromagnetic geophysical survey, and this is being funded under Prop 68. This is separately from the Basins Award, but in November of this year, DWR plans to fly using a helicopter a surface geophysical survey of the basin. We've been collecting e-logs and well logs to inform the flight lines that will be flown. They can't fly over residential areas, so they can only fly kind of in the open space. So we are working with them on that. We're presenting some information to DWR this Friday with the flight lines.
Is that because they fly so low?
It's just a requirement of the flight. They could technically fly, I think, from a height point over residential areas, but it's just a safety issue.
1,500 feet for
But you're right, Kathy. They fly the helicopters 200 feet elevate
so
height,
that's why.
and then the dangler is down at 100 feet above the surface.
That would be why.
Yeah.
Okay.
Emitting all kinds of strange waves. So get your tinfoil ready.
We'll warn the news.
So good progress on this with the Watermaster staff, and then the TAC will kind of have limited time to review this initial submittal because it's due on Friday. But the only action here is I do need permission from both the district and a few property owners to release the geophysical logs to the Watermaster staff and DWR. So I just wanted to bring.
Yeah, really. Do we have a forum for that? No. So geophysical information, that's just.
Well, you said well logs, right?
Well logs. So basically, yeah.
But he said also some private owners, I think.
Yeah, well, that's not us. So they're just looking for the coordinates for our wells, is that?
No, these are the geophysical logs were downhole logs that were collected prior to the wells being constructed. So we have downhole resistivity information that we can use to calibrate with the resistivity data that's going to be collected as part of the electromagnetic survey from the surface. So it's really important that we can calibrate that, and so we can better understand things like depth of bedrock and the characterization of the subsurface lithology.
Based on physical observations as they drilled the wells, we'll make sure that the helicopter data matches that data, the known data.
So
those few data
that's like calibrating.
Yeah, exactly.
So Steve, do we need to vote on that, or can we just say?
It would be better if you did, because there is an argument that information is not necessarily subject to the Public Records Act, and so the district board holds the authority to release that or not. It's your choice.
I think I'd feel better if we officially, thank you, Dave, and whatever that motion was, to release the, what did you call it, the geospatial?
Geophysical log.
Geophysical, yeah.
Geophysical log to.
That's what it said.
I didn't hear that, but thank you for reminding me.
The Watermaster Board.
To the TAC, is that who we're giving it to?
DWR.
Or DWR?
It's both.
Okay.
Both the Watermaster.
So release it to the Watermaster and DWR. All right. We got, did I get a second? Yes. Thank you. So much is happening all at once. All right, if there's no questions or comments, I will call the roll to approve the distribution of this information to the appropriate people.
You know who you are.
You know who you are. Director Duncan.
Aye.
Director Johnson.
Aye.
Director Moran.
Aye.
Director Baker.
Aye.
I also agree. So yes, go forward with that, Trey.
Thank you.
We got it. We think it's a really important project, so. Yeah,
Trey, did you say this work the TAC is doing is funded under the Water Masters,
No, I
Prop
think
68?
it's Prop
Totally
68, but
Totally separate.
it's a separate project that
Totally
someone
separate.
else is doing.
Totally separate. Nothing to do with our base. They've flown the whole state.
Okay.
We're region 10 out of 10, I think, that they've flown already.
Okay.
All throughout the state.
They got the money and they're doing it.
Trey, it's my understanding that this work will better map out, if you will, the basin itself and the bedrock bottom of the basin. Is that right?
Yes, the current technology that they're using looks down about 1,000 feet. So we will better understand the depth to bedrock in portions of the basin, and also better understand the hydrostratigraphy or the lithology that's encountered. So it's whether we've got finer grain materials or coarser materials. So that certainly will potentially lead to data that we can use to update the 3D geologic model of the basin, which in turn can be used to update the numerical model in the future. But likely that wouldn't happen because there is about a 6-month delay from when they fly to when we get the data, and then they actually do additional data processing. So we probably won't get all the data until fall of like 2024 almost. So likely the data they're collecting now would go into a future update of the Borrego Valley hydraulic model.
Great, thank you.
Sure.
I saw the webinar. It was really impressive interface. Once the data is all downloaded and put into the appropriate software, everything is color coded. You can see, the blues are good, the reds are bad, in terms of
So there's a website where you can see all that?
soil conditions that are between the surface and the bedrock, So
will we be able to access that information on our website?
Yeah. There's already quite a bit of data, I think, available already from the flights that they've done throughout the state. And then they can tie into different regions now, so yeah, it's really, really interesting.
So Trey, are they gonna fly enough flight lines to actually outline the entire basin? Or is it just certain parts of it?
Yeah, that's a good question. That's up for discussion with DWR. I did meet with Andy and Lauren with the Water Master staff yesterday, and based upon the locations of the well logs and the e-logs, we developed flight lines to present to DWR. We're going to send those out to the TAC this week to weigh in before Friday. But once we give those to the DWR, we have to better understand how many flight miles they will allow for flying the basin during this initial study. But we're still working out some of those details.
The more the merrier.
And is that,
Sure.
Is that where you were thinking that maybe, since they've already mobilized and everything, there could be additional flight lines that perhaps the Water Master would pay for? That would be where a request would come maybe in September or October to the Water Master. I know you're still figuring that out, but.
Yeah, I think we're providing them sufficient flight lines to cover the basin well and avoid the residential areas. DWR kind of provided us some draft lines that we revised. So depending on the outcome of future conversations with Water Master staff and some of the TAC members, potentially with DWR, we'll figure out whether or not we think they have a sufficient number of lines to fly, and whether or not we would come towards BWD or the basin to use Prop 68, other Prop 68 funds to fund this. And we still would have to get an answer from DWR to determine whether or not that would be fundable from the Prop 68 grant that's been awarded directly to the basin.
Okay. Thanks. Any other questions for Trey? Questions or comments?
Well, just FYI, Andy was on the same call, so Andy's fully up to speed on the flight. With DWR flight.
Terrific. Thank you, Trey. Appreciate your time.
Thanks, Trey.
Sure. Just a reminder, TAC meeting on August 29th at 10 a.m. I sent out an invite to everyone. The agenda was in that invite. We are going to be discussing the 5-year update in addition to the farm process. If you have any questions there, let me know. And then we have been, just a quick update, we have kind of gotten through all the groundwater quality data for the basin, and we are in the process of drafting a report and slides. But we do have some findings that I think will be pertinent to the water quality optimization study, and some recommendations for the TAC to start working on.
Is that report for the water master, or when is that report going to be presented?
This, we believe, will be ready in August board meeting to present the groundwater quality risk update for the Borrego Springs subbasin, with some recommendations for some potential optimization work, and also for filling additional data gaps in the basin.
Okay, so is that for the water master then, or for?
That's for the district, Borrego Water District.
Okay, so you'll present that in August?
Yes.
All right, thank you. Is that also going to be presented to the water master?
We could bring forth some of the issues in the TAC meeting, but I think that the water master staff would have to present some of our recommendations and vet them further. But we have compiled all the water master data and have some good information now for the basin.
Okay, great. Thank you, Trey.
Can you, Trey, give us information earlier in time for the judges status conference, in case there's something that we wanted to bring up there?
Well, your next BWD meeting is August, half of August.
August 8th. It's August 8th.
Yeah, so you have time.
But I'm wondering if that data will be, if your analysis will be far enough along that you could share it with us. If you think, how do we do this?
Trey, are you planning to present this at the August 8th BWD meeting? Or do you need more time?
So the meeting's earlier in August? I didn't catch that.
We're only having one meeting in August at the BWD, and that'll be August 8th. Otherwise, we go back to our regular schedule in September. So when
I think
you would want to be able to present this information?
The full presentation to the board should be in September then, but we would be prepared to meet with the water committee folks and present some preliminary information that they could use.
Perfect, great. So if they wanted to bring that forward for the judges conference, they could. Okay, right? Well, good. I really appreciate your report, Trey. I really thank you very much.
Absolutely.
All right.
Have a great day.
Point of discussion for Steve. Go ahead.
Steve, I assume that you expect a copy of whatever Jim Markman is going to submit to the judge prior to. Is that your expectation?
Yeah, that's what was agreed to about 6-9 months ago, was that Jim would prepare a draft, and then we'd have an opportunity to insert more information into the draft management conference statement. So that is my expectation.
Well, it would be nice to be able to discuss whatever's in that draft at our August 8th meeting if it gets done that fast, but I sincerely doubt that will happen.
It's not till the 27th. 7th, it's probably.
But I mean, certainly he's gonna get you something that you would hope at least 2 weeks in advance.
I would hope. I mean, the status conference is on the 18th. We ordinarily submit documents to the court a week in advance, which would be the 11th. So hopefully Jim will get it to us the first part of that August 7th week at the latest.
All right,
And
thank you.
And the judge wanted a presentation that is from all of you, all the attorneys?
One report.
On one report, right?
Yeah, so ordinarily we have one big report, but we can insert our own paragraph or 10 if we so choose, if we don't agree with what the other folks have said. But yeah, we'd ordinarily try to do that as a joint statement.
Okay.
Would it be appropriate to prompt him, Steve, so we could have some discussion of it at our August 8th meeting?
I can reach out and ask him when he's planning to give that to us.
Okay, well, good enough. Thank you.
All right. All right, we're going to go to the section 3, our board committee reports. Are there any reports? I mean, we've kind of covered some of the stuff we needed to do in our committees. The standing and ad hoc committees. Anybody have anything? I know that we've talked a little bit about Prop 68 outreach. We're looking at the possibility of having a booth at Borrego Days, where we allow people or give people information about one of the outreach projects that is mandated in our Prop 68 work. So we have the Water Master and BVS, the Borrego Valley Stewardship Council Committee, and the school district, and us, and UCI. So we all have components that are outreach. And so we thought, well, why don't we use Borrego Days as an initial way to let people know what's going on in the community and talk to them about water. So we're working on that, right? And Diane and I are also hoping to start coordinating with the other folks that have outreach components in their Prop 68 work to see what we can all, do so that we don't duplicate things and that we work together on our outreach in terms of messaging. So that's outreach. And Diane.
Well, I was just gonna note that Tammy and Jeff and I and Steve had a meeting with the T2 folks again. I think it was just early last week. And Tammy, do you want to give an update on where we are with our fundamental negotiations?
I'm happy to have you give the update, Dave.
Oh, come on. Okay.
Well, what we have done is that Steve drafted a memorandum of understanding, which identified, some of the key issues. I think that as he has described, he's tried to keep it at the 50,000 foot level and not really, dive into particular details of what our ultimate agreement might be. I know that Jeff offered to refine his scope of work or the critical issues that need to be addressed initially. I think he sent that off to
Saturday.
Shannon and to Kathy, and there's another attorney in Multinsville, and I forget her name. Brooke Miller. And they also have a land use guy they're working with, and they've hired a new guy, and I forgot his name. He's local, who was working with their.
Oh, the construction manager that they hired up there, who was at the Water Master meeting?
Yeah.
I can't remember his name either.
So, we have agreed to continue to talk. Some of their questions can't be answered just because, we don't have the EDU issue resolved yet, and the bottlenecks at the wastewater treatment plant. So we're moving forward. They still have to provide a fair amount of information that allows us fully understand what the phasing is of their growth. I asked Shannon some time ago, whether the golf course would be constructed soon or not. You know, in my mind, it seemed like the way that you draw people to buy expensive lots is to actually have the golf course done. And he said, no, not necessarily, that there's one whole eastern section of their new development, which is gonna kind of be.
On the old golf course?
No, he describes it as desert living.
Yeah.
Right,
I don't know how
where the
many.
houses are kind of hidden from each
Yeah,
other.
and I don't know how many homes that includes. You know, but they need to give us yet a lot of information, particularly about the phasing and what they expect to do. But we did agree that in terms of the engineering work, would be done by them, and then we would have an opportunity to review. You know, there was a discussion for a while that we would actually provide an engineer to do that, but I think that there was some concern about liability to the district, you know, for doing that work. Essentially on all private property, this isn't we laying a pipeline in public right of way. This is all behind a gate. So we did agree to that. So was there anything else I might have missed?
I thought one thing, we did invite representatives of T2 to make a presentation of our board in the near future. It looks like the next meeting, September 8th, they will be here just to share their most recent plans and to start a public discussion with our board.
Anything else, Tammy?
I think some of the big topics are that we don't have answers to, that we're working with them on. Dave, everything you said is perfect. Is the whole concept of getting water up to Rams Hill area, and this concept of wheeling or not wheeling, and getting sufficient irrigation water up for their second golf course. That's open, and there's a lot of talk that needs to happen on that. They are going to share with us the process they're going through with the county, just for our enlightenment. I'm just personally interested to understand all the steps that they must go through working with the county, of which they have a few dependencies on us, but there's a whole bunch of other dependencies they have. So that sort of educational process is coming. And then Jeff has shared with them. Yes, I think you have this, they're starting to work on the more detailed technical areas to evaluate, of which I just mentioned wheeling, that's one of them. Another very important one is, if you look forward to the future and there are 1,500 homes and second golf course, and that the water needs to be provided for all of that, it would come from the current southern management area and the central management area. And specifically, what's the impact to the central management area with respect to water tables and the amount of water in it, because that is where BWD draws its water for its customers. And is there a possibility that there's insufficient water in the central management area to meet BWD's current needs plus REMS T2's future needs? Does that mean that BWD needs to move to the northern management area to get sufficient water? That's another big open topic that just needs the technical work.
And of course, northern management area is where the water quality issues are, yeah.
So
It's just an open question. Is there enough water in the central management area to meet all of BW's current needs and future needs, in 30 years, as well as T2's long-term development plans? Open question.
So I think it's fair to assume that the residential needs are going to require about 800 acre-feet on an annual basis, and then irrigation for second golf course will also require about 800 acre-feet. So it's a significant amount of water in total. One thing that I forgot to mention is that it hasn't been determined yet by the county, but I think it's fair to assume that they may need some additional flood control measures. And I've made clear to them that we have no desire to expand the flood control facility that we're responsible for now, and we would like to get out of the stuff we are now obligated to do. So they know from the get-go here that if additional flood control measures are needed, don't look to the BWD.
I like it.
I'd like to, add that it, that we also need to be aware that there are a fair number of domestic wells at the very south end of the central management area, I think. And we shouldn't only be worrying about impacts to our production wells, but DWR, you've heard me say a few times now in the last few months, they have that new guidance document on not impacting domestic drinking water wells. Yeah. Right. So that's
Yes,
really
thank you.
a water master thing, I think, actually. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that there is more and more concern about domestic de minimis wells, and because of the impacts they've had in other parts of California. Yeah. Any other committee reports? I know that budget and audit is still going to come up with in the fall maybe a RFQ for the. Oh, you're so good.
Then we're gonna have a committee meeting, right, to talk about cash flow and reserve funds. Remember, we talked about that a month or so ago.
Yeah.
About a month ago.
And
see that come back.
On the outreach, Jeff, you sent out 10 days ago a Prop 68 update to all the sub-grantees, and you asked, do any of you plan to conduct public outreach? Let's discuss. Has anybody gotten back to you about that?
I followed that up with my initial idea was the Borrego Days approach, and I have received responses. Everybody but the school has got back to me with the follow-up. That's first one. And I shamed him a little bit with the second email, but I didn't hear back from anyone, so yeah. But I heard back after the second.
We just need to coordinate all of that and figure out what we want the.
In essence, Borrego Days is the first attempt at doing that, and then that's the beginning, and then what happens after that? You know, Travis is talking about doing some on-site events at some of his facilities during Borrego Days. You know, it's not just doing the booth at the circle, but something else.
Yeah,
kind of
it would be nice to have some.
Got him thinking about doing some other things.
Yeah. We have to think of what we can do to.
Do an open house here maybe, or I don't know, something, I don't know. But
we'll figure it out.
Yeah.
After September, we'll have that meeting. Anybody else? Okay, now we're going to go down to staff reports, section 4. First up is the monthly water production and operations report.
Good morning. Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Quick numbers on the production. We used 133 acre feet in June. July, the use is down to about 116. It's a 17 acre difference. I attribute that to not selling any water to Rams Hill Golf Course. Rockfield Wells also has used very little water, solar project. And to the fact that less people in town, less domestic use.
Restaurants are pretty slow.
Yeah, everybody's slow, everybody's calmed down. So that covers that. Updates in the field, twin tanks and Ramsdale 2, the new tanks are in service, being used right now.
Really? The one at
Twin tanks, uptown, and then one at Ramsdale 2, the very furthest southern tank that we have, that's now in service also.
So are you gonna tear down the other tanks then?
No, we'll leave it for a while.
Okay.
But
it's so attractive.
I know, it's terrible, don't they?
I love the new one. I think it's a much nicer
It's gonna be a
profile.
lot more presentable to the community once the old tanks are
Right
out.
now, that other one looks like a big pimple.
It just looks awful. So yeah, what the scheduling is on that is, because of the aesthetics, I requested that the contractor go ahead. Now that those two tanks are constructed, we have the new ones in service. We're beginning the demolition process at twin tanks. As we speak, they're ready, the roof to be collapsed, and then that was a little tricky because the tank's very close to the new tank.
Yeah.
So they're gonna be pretty careful as far as demolition, but they'll demolish that and haul all the scrap metal off-site, so that site can be prettied up, so to speak. We can get the aesthetics cleaned up, the construction fencing removed. Plan to put minimal fencing in at that site, just to protect our valves and important things. I don't see the point in encircling the whole thing with a big shiny prism-like fence.
Yeah, that's great.
So
I like the idea of
minimized, and
protecting the
probably
essential.
will also maybe paint that fence like we did at well 15 to make it blend a little more aesthetically. You don't see a big shiny structure.
Great.
But yeah, so that's in progress. It was a little hectic there the last couple of weeks, getting the new tanks done, getting them disinfected, getting ready to fill the tanks within 48 hours of disinfection. And I took samples all at the same time. We had Eric from Control Systems come and swap all the SCADA from the old tanks to the new tanks. So my guys were really scrambling. There was a whole weekend where Benito was on call. He had to physically monitor tank levels and wells running.
Make sure they were running
Tanks
right.
full, because we had no SCADA. We were flying blind, basically.
Nice.
What they used to do with the old tanks, I don't know how they did it. But,
It's hard to go back, you know, when you've got the.
Unbelievable. When I first started, the SCADA was very poor, and it's night and day difference now. We have a great SCADA system, and great personnel working on it. So that's the plan up there. We're gonna get that tank demolished, and we're gonna clean that site. We'll move to Rams Hill to demolish that secondary tank. Then we'll begin the demolition at Indian Head. Because with that tank, we can't build another tank next to it. Unfortunately, we're not in space. So the way that's gonna work is we'll take that tank out of service, and we have a booster station that's fully operational. As of tomorrow, it will be completely finished to where it'll work. But we'll provide water for Indian Head Ranch during that construction using the booster station and water from ID4. So we'll shut well 18 off, and well 9 and well 11 will provide all the water for while that project's going. So yeah, it's pretty cool.
Nice.
Let's see what else we have. Next thing I want to mention today, I went this morning about the SDG alignment at the Indian Head booster. We call it the well 3 booster station for Indian Head. We're installing a new transfer switch because we purchased a generator specifically to power that and other lighter uses here around the district, even at the offices if need be. They're installing a new transfer switch, so all we have to do is throw a switch to use our generator or SDG&E. Also, they're making the contractors modifying our generator with a specific cord and plug-in to do all this work. And they're providing us with a backup pump and motor, just in case we have a failure. We can go and in an afternoon have it swapped out and get the new one right back up and going. So the other option was to rebuild add a second pump in line, but it was quite an expensive project, and maybe we'll try to budget money for both of our booster stations in the future to be upgraded to that capability. That's down the road. So, so today the power's off there. They're putting the switch in tonight. Contractor's gonna work all night because of the heat. And we're back in the morning, the SDG&E guy will come back and reconnect the wires to the pole, and we're good to go on that. Well, 15 update. We have power, finally. After 2.5 years, we have a meter at the property. The account was set up. I aided in that process to get the account set up. All the mechanical work is basically done as far as the well being in the hole. The discharge pipe is connected to the system, but it's isolated as of now, where the crew is going to start put out the hottest fires first, but our next step is to build our flush ponds. We're gonna have to do substantial flushing. And we're gonna run the pipes from the wellhead to the flush pond. It's basically all we have left to do. Then we start the process of Title 22 testing as we put the well into service. They're gonna ask for very comprehensive test, quarterly testing on the well for the first year. We went through it at well 9. I think that pretty much covers everything on well 15. PFAS update. I have requested the sample files from Babcock Labs. I believe the tests per source are going to be around $500, between $400 and $500.
Yeah.
Jeff also requested that we do a influence sample at the wastewater plant just to see if there's anything coming in from.
Oh, that's a good idea.
It's like the infection contact, it's restaurant discharge and.
Hey, we're all
Just an
full of
FYI.
PFAS, we just already.
Well, it's here. Worldwide, it's here.
Yeah.
There's no question. Whether we have any in our water might be questionable. We don't have a lot of sources. Our landfill would be a big source. They're finding that stuff at firefighting foam. It's the big thing you read on.
Fertilizers.
Every firefighter
Jackets.
ever been trained.
Microwave popcorn.
Popcorn bags, butter wrappers. Treated with that so the grease doesn't leak through the paper wrapper. I never even would imagine that.
Whatever happened to wax paper?
Yeah, well,
You know, we invent these new things that we think are so great, and then we go and find out that it's not.
It's horrible. So that's in the works. I should have some results by your September 1st meeting. They should get results from the lab to know where we're standing on that. Trey had some recommendation. I'm following basically the State Water Board recommendation guides.
Yeah, we talked about that the last week.
I missed the report that Trey did last time. I know you're filled in. Very specific sampling. The wastewater sample is going to require a different method to do the sampling. So I'm going to work with the lab on getting all the information to do it properly. But you can contaminate the samples if you put gas in the pickup at the end of the sample.
Isn't that great?
If you eat some food that has PFAS wrapper on it.
Luckily, we don't have McDonald's here.
I know, or Burger King.
We're safe, yeah.
So, yeah, it's pretty specific. So I'm getting my head around all the stuff and the procedures that I need to do the sampling. We have to document the samples in a logbook, and I have to note that, yes, we have Teflon tape on our connections at the wellhead, so there is Teflon tape. That's Teflon, it's PFAS. I've worked on my sample ports a little bit to ensure that no Teflon is protruding into the water stream. It's all exterior, so I just updated those the last couple of days. I went out and changed those out. Very specific, but interesting.
Yeah.
And like I said, I hope we'll have some report results for you guys in your September meeting. That's about all I got. If anybody has questions.
I think what you brought in is like a show and tell.
Show and tell looks very interesting.
Yes.
This occurred yesterday about 10 a.m. The guys were just finishing their lunch. They got a call and there's water coming out of the ground down by in front of the telephone building, right by downtown. That's what 60-year-old.
Old rusty metal, haven't you, buddy?
How old is it, Alan?
Probably 60 years. That's from the original
Saddle.
lines. That's the
Pipe
saddle
goes
that goes around the pipe.
Oh, wow.
The materials are inferior back in the technology when it was built. That was top notch. It's an iron saddle, iron and water and dirt built.
It was never, I mean, not
They've
a
been-
galvanized piece or anything, just black iron?
It's transite pipe. It's just mild steel, black iron saddle. And we have basically from the Georgia Road all the way to Hobart Road, right? All of our saddles are built like that.
That's a lot.
Since I started here, I've done about 4 replacements.
What do you replace it with?
Brass or stainless steel. you know.
So you take a whole section of pipe, right? Put a new pipe.
If you have to, yesterday,
Might not have to. Okay.
they were able to salvage the pipe, they put a stainless clamp where this broke,
Wow.
and they actually just moved a new tap a little further down the main pipe, put a new saddle on with a new
I see the
cork valve.
clamp around that whole, I got you, yeah.
But the other option is replace the whole section.
Repair clamp and a new saddle, gotcha.
Repair clamp, saddle, a new cork valve, some more copper pipes, some extra fittings. But yeah, that's what, and I'm guessing that was probably put in the early 60s, the downtown part of this.
Yeah.
It's a big, so a lot of our connections are right in this area, so. Anywho, so that's why I don't have a guy from the crew today, because they're fixing asphalt.
We get it. Anyway, thank you. That was a great report, and thanks for the show and tell.
Question?
Yes, go ahead, Tammy. Oh, do you want to see the pipe that we?
Well, you could show it to the camera for everybody who's, remote like me. But I have a question. So we, a while ago, talked about having a demonstration garden in front of the house. Oops, there we go. Thank you. That is scary impressive. A demonstration garden of doing, irrigation techniques. In the spirit of doing that, this is my well 15 Santiago Estates dream, is with our wells, because of the process of doing a purge of water before it goes into the system and a purge at the end of the pumping, we dump water out next to our wells and can create basically a little oasis. And you can see that around a bunch of our wells. And so is there some possibility that we can use our required discharge water to create some oasis-like garden for the folks at Santiago Estates? Since they're now looking at the improved, but nonetheless still fence, can we do something, because we have, free water, water that we must discharge as part of just properly running the well. Can we do something with that improves the sort of visual landscape for that, large Santiago Estates mobile home park?
So you're talking about something within the fencing, but on the side of Santiago Estates?
I'm just talking about something that if I lived in Santiago Estates and looked at that well, that instead of looking just like at that sort of less unattractive fence, something, we have like free water. Can we do something that makes it, just more visually appealing for them? It's a question. I don't know. I'm not the person that would design it.
Well, here's the thing. When the flush water, when the well is all into service, when it comes on in the morning, we set the time for the flush. So it gives a chance for any sand or discoloration or anything that might occur. Gives it a certain amount of time to flush until the water gets clear. It just goes into a pond, basically inside the fence, because we want security.
But where inside the fence?
Well, it's going to be in the corner, the southeast corner of that fence. Here's my problem with it. I don't really want anybody inside our fence.
No, I don't think that was the idea.
The other option, I don't know if it would generate enough water to be a reliable source to irrigate plants. If it was that type of a reservoir, we'd have to have some sort of a pump system to push water to whatever we're going to irrigate. I think the original idea, if the residents at San Diego were going to maybe plant some shrubs or trees or something to kind of hide the fence, and that would be just basically something you could turn a valve on at the well and water weekly, every 2 weeks, whatever it would require.
And at the other well sites where you flush the well?
Some of them are not secured by fence.
Right, well, I guess my question was, has habitat come up, natural habitat come up?
Oh, yeah. Well 5 is a great example over by San Diego, just down 15. there was palm trees and salt cedars and arrowweed and birds and
So-
wildlife. People go over there and watch the birds, the crows come in and they eat their food, they get a drink of water, and they know the timing.
So Tammy, is that sort of what you're talking about? Creating a
Yeah.
habitat that doesn't need to be tended and
Yes.
doesn't have public interaction? Maybe
Yes.
have a landscape person, I don't know, there seems like there's some possibilities in it.
The trouble with using the flush pond to do that is
Periodic.
it's very periodic. We've designed the whole system. Unfortunately, the whole well manifold is already installed. We plan on piping that water to the south end and not the north end of the fence. It could be done, but it's a real major pain in the butt to do that. Then we could create a natural oasis effect. But our original design and preference was to have the freshwater stay on site, keep it secure, and not to say we couldn't come up with something, but I don't know if it's really practical or not.
So, well, having something pop up on the south side isn't a bad thing either, because there's visual.
It's a habitat issue, it's a
Yeah.
habitat issue. It
Yeah.
doesn't happen.
No,
There's
but if you're planning to plant, shrubs along the fence line on the north side, that would be okay.
Well, and I don't think that we really want to maximize habitat that we've created, because once we create that,
You have to maintain
it
it.
has to be maintained, or
So accidental habitat.
it could open a whole different can of worms with another state agency.
Okay.
So I'd be really reluctant to do that.
It's a nice idea in theory.
On the good point is the groundwater, the water that does get discharged from the well, recharges our aquifer.
Yeah.
As it percolates in.
Eventually.
Yeah, well, 300 years from now.
But yeah, okay. Does that answer your question, Tammy, for now? Something to think about. But I think there is still plans to beautify the north side of the fence then for the residents of Santiago. But certainly if habitat does pop up on the south side, that'll be something everyone can enjoy.
Well, it shield us from the view of Santiago as well.
There you go. Okay. No offense taken.
I guess I'm just going to throw in, I hear everybody, it's disappointing to me that we have this sort of free water, water that we must discharge, that we can't make better use of it. And I say better than recharge. I know recharge is important, but it just is sort of a little bit disappointing. But I hear everybody and I understand.
Well,
pump it into a tank and treat it and then sell it.
So how much water do you think you discharge every time?
Not very much.
And it's only
800 gallons a minute for 3 minutes, twice a day. So
I think
4,000 or 5,000 gallons a day.
every possibility, Tammy, that habitat will kind of
It'll
pop up
occur inside the fence, it just won't be presentable to
to the other
those
side,
residents.
but they can bird watch.
And they've got a great spot just across the street to do that. Unfortunately, your view isn't really to the east, it's to the south and to the north.
I hear you, Tammy, though.
It's wasteful, there's no doubt.
Thanks for your
It'd
thoughts
be
on
great
that.
to have that asset to use it somewhere else.
Any other questions or comments for Alan? Thank you very much. Good report. Your turn, Roy. I guess we've talked a lot about all that.
Yeah, I mean, basically, again, like I keep telling you all the time, wastewater is just a repeat process. The only thing that changed is my flow, which, again, I prefer to get 1 million gallons every day. I know it's not gonna happen, and I just have to make it work and live with whatever I get.
I don't think any of us are gonna see even 200,000 in our lifetime.
Yeah. And again, it's whatever you guys do in the study of what it's gonna take to be there, it's good. Because, we all get an idea, like, hey, you know what? Hey, who knows, maybe tomorrow Rumsfeld decide, you know what, I'm not gonna be on 1,200, I'm gonna build 5,000 homes. You never know, I mean, like, anything can happen in this world, you know?
Yeah, if aliens landed.
Yeah. But, I mean, other than that, I mean, it's just, who knows, you know, like, I've been here 30-something years and only see few houses here and there, that's it,
You know? All of us have had the same observation.
Yeah, I mean, my report is there, and, I don't know if you have any questions or.
No, I think we covered your situation pretty thoroughly.
And then I'm working with Greg and Agata doing the study, whatever they need. Diana is helping me too with the SSMP and the fund. We got it out, we send it to them, they revive everything, and then let's see if they can make any changes. So we're doing all that, you know, like it's just a teamwork between office, Jeff and Dan and us, and we're just gonna make it happen.
And you do. I love what this staff does. All right. Thank you, Roy. Jessica?
All righty.
Talk to us about finances?
Sure thing. Esmeralda, if you wanna let me share, I'll just roll on through this stuff. So I'm going to go through the.
Can you get rid of the slow network connection sign that's on my, has anybody got that on their screen?
Probably.
Ignore it. Can you
just you?
Just ignore it. I think all of this.
I can.
Oh, I guess whoever's on the BWD, I'm
That's
on
okay.
my hotspot today. Maybe we'll have to.
I've seen the reports. I just
Okay.
thought maybe other people had the same thing.
So this is the report for June, which was the last month of fiscal year 23. So at the end of the month, including a little bit of bond funds remaining, we had about $6.287 million in the bank. That was before we made the payment on the William Bauer property, so it's going to be even smaller on the next report. Looking through the revenues, let's see, total water revenues were $363,000. Commodity was $229, about $6,000 under our estimate. If you want to look at the whole year, now that we've gone through the whole year, I did verify those numbers. So water rates, we brought in $3.9 million, where we had budgeted $4.1. The biggest discrepancies were residential and commercial usage, which we did get a little more rain this year. I know there's been a lot of drought messaging. On the sewer end, for the year, we brought in just under $671,000, so we did have a few new connections. But on the monthly rates, we were a little bit over our budgeted. We had some new connections, so that helped us out. Let's see. You'll see on there under other income, there's two other lines. I guess I could have labeled those better, but since it's the end of the fiscal year, and in this fiscal year we did settle up the whole Mesquite Trail delinquency. So they did have a deposit on hand before all this all started of $7,500. So I went ahead and moved that into the revenue category, and the same thing, Ocotillo Solar, when they first started their agreement with us, they had put down a deposit, which I've seen labeled as deposit, I've seen labeled as water rights. I don't think there was
Non-refundable deposit.
Non-refundable.
Started out as water rights, which they're not buying, and that was the wrong term, so that got changed.
So we got to recognize that $28,000 as income, so that was nice. And that brings our total income for the year just over $5 million at 5.08. Our budget was 5.13, so about 70 grand under budget. The CIP projects that we get reimbursed for, those are technically revenue on the audited financials. But, you know, we all know that we're just getting paid back for work we did. So I kept them under the grant area, which we'll get to at the end. Any questions on revenue so far? On the expenses, so operating expenses, we were under our budget by a little over 50,000, which the guys are pretty good at staying under that. Professional services, we did cut a big check to Dudex for the studies that Greg went over with us. That's still at the end of the day our professional services category. We were still about $45,000 under budget for the year. Insurance, we paid our last workers' comp for June. That was a little high, but we were expecting that. And then personnel expense, in the end we came out about 1.6 million where we had budgeted 1.75. So, you know, some categories we did go over, but by being conservative in others, it all kind of balanced out. Office expenses, nothing too crazy there. Debt service, as expected. And then the groundwater management, so our total expenses, including pumping fees, that includes the supplemental assessment, were $240,000 for the year. And we'll get into the groundwater management detail later on. So our net income for June was $194,000. Our net income for the year was about $736,000, where we had budgeted $488,000. But a lot of that cash got used up already. Looking at our CIPs, SDG&E did have a $300,000 deposit with us. That now that project's over, we got to move that into our reimbursed category, which, according to the financial statements, will be contributed capital, which is technically revenue. I'm still waiting on the final payment for that. They don't move too fast. It is SDG&E, but I'll probably bother them if I don't hear from them in a week or so. Also, when I went through here, I added project totals to date. So if you look at the cash sewer projects, so for the La Casa gravity main, we finally finished that. We spent $45,000 this year, but I did add in the item description the total for the project since its inception. So it ended up being, you know, a $500,000 and change project. Oxygen injection system where we finished, that totaled $23,000. Seems like a small sum for helping with all those stinky smells. So that's something we can look back on, be glad for. All the short-lived assets that we bought during the year are included on there. You know, we had some unexpected things come up through the year that are listed there that weren't originally budgeted. All in all, we spent about $351,000 was our net spending on cash funded CIP for the year. Bond funded, well 15 is still going into fiscal year 24. To date, we've spent just over $2 million on that. Working on the tank and motor grant, $562,000 was our invoices from Superior for June. And total on that project so far, we've spent $1.7 million. I am going to be submitting our first reimbursement request. I'm trying to get it done by the end of this week. Keep in mind, they did tell us on the tanks, we have to wait until everything, the twin tanks, sorry. So everything with state parks is said and done. And that's probably going to be about $600,000 altogether just for that tank. So that will still be receivable. The water treatment plant rehab project was finished at the beginning of this fiscal year. The total on that was about $692,000, and that was all reimbursed through the grant. And then our Prop 68. So we are waiting right now. We have $80,000 in with DWR that we're waiting for our check for. That includes the AMI, the monitoring wells, and the administrative costs through the end of June, or actually through the end of March, I'm sorry. So our next grant reimbursement request is going to be due the end of August. So that is not reflected in here. And that's where we ended up on CIP for the year.
One question,
Yes.
Wilcox motor
Mm-hmm.
and such, I thought was a reimbursable.
It is as well.
Is there some timing involved with getting reimbursed?
So that'll be submitted so that, 88,000 that we've spent to date through 6/30 is gonna be part of my reimbursement request. So I know I just said tanks, but tank and motor.
Okay, thank you.
Easy to forget to add the and motor.
So Jessica, I have a question on the Casa del Zorro thing we zoomed past.
Mm-hmm.
With like those 500,000, yeah, 548. What is the I think I know the answer, but what's the electric line repair?
So when we went and did the work, so actually the electric line repair was, I think all we did this fiscal year, so that would have been the $45,000 of the 548. And once we got in there and started digging, I think it was Rove, they had to kind of be very careful around the SDG&E lines, and ultimately it had to be relocated because it was too close to the new gravity main.
Yeah, okay, that's what I thought.
That's all done now. They did the paving, so we should be capitalizing that project for fiscal year 23.
Thank you.
Just look at the cash flow. I know there's some really big numbers in our AP and AR. So the accounts receivable, I added in that tank and motor grant amount through June 30th. Also in the AP, we had a couple invoices for Superior, the tank and motor contractor. Just been waiting to get all their labor compliance documentation, so we've kind of been holding on to a few checks from them. To date, we still have to pay them the June check, but that added on our AP, and trying to get everything in. It's always a little game for Diana and I at the end of the fiscal year to get everything accounted for. But at the end of the year, our cash and reserves was about 6.1 million. Our target, this is according to the existing cash flow model, before any changes in reserve policy that the finance committee can talk about. Target was just over 7 million, so we were about $1 million short. That includes the William Bauer purchase after that's said and done, but we still have to account for the David Bauer, which will deplete our reserves in even more. And that's kind of all I have on the fiscal year financials. I'm not done yet, but does anybody have any questions so far?
I have a question, I think more for Jeff, maybe that roughly $2 million that we spent on well 15. Can we use that? Is that representative enough that we could use that as a rough estimate for how much it would cost if we need to drill a new well?
But maybe even more, because this was cost that we incurred 3-ish years ago, so it's probably gone up even more. So I'd say at least $2 million for a new well.
Yeah.
You got 2 points. Because we did the work pre-pandemic.
Any other questions? Okay. Go forward.
Moving forward, so the balance sheet, I did do a number of year-end adjustments. However, nothing's been capitalized yet, so everything's still in CIP on the utility plant and service section. Other changes in our cash and AP. Let's see, our restricted cash went down because we turned some of those deposits into revenue, so now we get to spend the money. And then I did the CFD year-end adjustments. It doesn't really affect our books since we're just a fiduciary. But things are operating on the CFD as expected. No issues there this year. And going on. And then we have a list of all of our big expenses over $1,000 for the month of June. And then a list of all the checks that we cut that were posted to June. Pretty big. And then we get into our very detailed water master accounting. So for the year, let's see, I know one of the board members was asking about specifics. So I did pull the total legal expense for water master for the year. We gave BBK just over $40,000. In Terra, we paid $108,500 for the year. I think their proposal was 111. I did not go back and check on that. Other expenses in the water master category was staff time, mostly for the meter reading, and then the transducers that we bought. I did include that in my reimbursement request to the water master. I asked Sam beforehand if it was reimbursable. She didn't reply, so I just asked for it, and hopefully they'll pay it. I don't see why not. And then our crew provided about just under $10,000 in meter reading services to the water master for the year. Did you have any questions on water master items?
Dudek, there are.
So the one Dudek item on there was a reimbursement. So we had, at the end of the prior fiscal year, we had a tax retainer for Trey. So we got that refunded.
Okay. Shouldn't there be Dudek checks though, like for work Greg has been doing?
That is.
Oh, that's not water master.
Right, so that would have been under the engineering category on the cash flow.
Thank you.
So the $108,000 to Interra, then it's our tax expense.
Mm-hmm.
Is that on an annualized basis, or what's the period of time that you're reporting here?
So yeah, so that was for the whole fiscal year.
Yeah.
I kind of remember their quote being 111, but Trey did tell me that some of the tax from this year were kind of left over from the prior fiscal year, and that's probably going to happen again right now. So just keep an eye on it.
Any questions for Jessica? Any other questions, I should say? Thank you.
All right. And then just the Ocotillo solar water, they have 4.5 acre feet left on their account.
Wow.
They only used 1/4 of an acre foot over the last month. So.
Do we know, does that mean they're almost done with?
Well, they're done with us.
Get to zero. They started with 40. 40.
Right,
So they're done with 40.
Yeah.
I'm not even planning on asking you to renew it. I'm smart enough to not even ask. So I've told them that. The 40 is it, that's done, I'm not gonna ask for any more. You need to find your own source. They'll work it all out.
That's all. If you want any finance updates, try to give them all in the description, getting the finance committee meeting together. Just need to make sure of, I think, Ms. Baker's availability for the next couple weeks. And then this Thursday is the county has an annual finance symposium. It's going to be, I think, at the county operations building, so I'm planning to attend that. The last 2 years it's been online because of COVID, and it has been very interesting. They give you an update kind of on what's going on with the property values on the tax roll and kind of higher level county budget stuff and new requirements and things like that. So that should be fun.
Oh boy.
Yeah.
Anything else?
That's all I got.
All righty. I appreciate you, Jessica, and all the work you do. As well as Diana, who is next.
Okay, so we had our new rates that became effective July 1st. They will be appearing on this month's water bill for our customers. customers. And, so we did notify our customers. We have a post on our website, and we also put a newsletter in the bill. So you should, I don't know if you all saw that, but it was in there. We have, still on customer service, we have customers continue to migrate over to our paperless billing every month, which is great because that saves us on postage, copy paper, envelopes and so forth. So I asked Laura this morning, and she said that we have about 383 customers that have migrated over to paperless billing since September 2022, which equals about, just alone, about $200 a month in savings. So hopefully that continues. I'm sure it will. I reported that we were going to be migrating over to the AT&T FirstNet network, and that is pretty much completed. All of the crew members have new SIM cards inserted in their phones and into our SCADA tablets, so those are also on our FirstNet network. And some of our hotspots, like for instance, Jessica's hotspot that she's using today is a FirstNet hotspot. Very good. So far, so good. So moving on over to FirstNet not only gives us a better reliability if the traditional network goes down, it's a prioritized network, but it also saves us about $2,500 a year on our mobility bill. And talking about savings, I'm still working on reducing our SDG bills. I was able to confirm with SDG that changing to different plans will reduce our bills. However, since it's not just SDG anymore, it's also San Diego Community Power that we are now having to deal with too. So before I said, okay, let's go, I wanted to double check with them to make sure that changing rate over here isn't going to negatively impact it over here. So I had a call with them last week, and they're going to do an analysis on one of our bills, and we'll gather that information. And then I feel that it's going to still be a positive impact, changing our rates and saving us some money. So I'm hoping that within this next month that will be done after getting all the analysis done. Our postage machine will need to be changed because the post office is requiring all postage machines to be compliant with what's called an IMI, or Intelligent Indica, which provides data and security management for the post office. So what that means for us, we own our postage machine. We purchased it about, 7-10 years ago or something like that. And so I'm looking to, with our current vendor and also taking both to either one, do new lease, or do a lease option, or do a purchase like we have now with the maintenance agreement. So I'm just looking at the quotes, and we're going to choose which one is going to be the best option for us.
How much do they normally run?
To purchase, it normally runs around $3,000 per purchase, and roughly around maybe $1,200 or $1,500 for an annual maintenance agreement. So I mean, there's pros and cons.
Yeah.
If you purchase, then it's a big expense up front, but then the maintenance is a little bit less as compared to just leasing the machine, and which could be a little bit lower, but then you don't own it. So there's pros and cons. So, I'm working with one more rep to give me a different quote and what I was previously quoted, and then they'll go from there.
Okay. Just curious. Thank you. I know you'll get the best deal.
Yeah. Try to be frugal with our money. So yes, I'll be looking to, whether we're going to purchase or lease the machine. We are finishing up with the June accounts payable, and moving over files and so forth, all of that busy fun stuff for year end. I am taking a quote for carpet replacement, and inside painting. I need to find a couple painters to give me some quotes for the inside office. Our carpet is looking pretty worn and it's original carpet, so we've had it cleaned several times, so it's showing some wear and tear. So I'm going to get a quote from our local decor shop, and then probably Home Depot. I don't know if they come out here, but I'll be getting a couple quotes to see which one will be best for us. And then I sent out to you this morning when Rick was going through the wastewater stuff. I sent you the SSMP, so I've already sent that out to your email, so that should be. Thank you.
SSMP, that's the sewer system management plan.
Yeah.
Of 2018, apparently.
Right, yeah. So with that, what was updated in that plan was just the fog control portion, which is section 6 of that plan. So not the whole entire thing was looked at, just that one particular section.
But does it have the whole plan?
The whole thing.
Okay.
Yes, the whole thing.
I guess the part that we were hearing about today was about the water softeners.
Right, which is in section 7 of that plan. Yes.
I was using the term master plan, which totally messed up my brain. We don't have a sewer master plan. It's a
Right.
management plan.
Okay.
We have, I know we have that. But
It
it's the
still
master
doesn't ring
plan.
any, it still doesn't ring any bells.
Yeah.
Thank you,
Right.
Diana.
Yes. That's all I have.
That's enough.
Yeah, that's all. You're hired. Okay, yeah. Hold my plate.
Oh, my dear. Thank you.
Cool.
Anything from legal counsel that doesn't,
Yeah, Steve, I gave you a spot in case you need it. Got anything?
Nope, I think we decided you were going to announce something in your general manager report, right, Jeff? So that's for you.
About the power deal?
Yeah.
I don't need to do, I thought I was gonna attach the documents and everything. Do that at the next meeting.
Okay.
Yeah, okay.
Never mind then. I have nothing.
Disclosing the Bauer deal, I plan on putting the documents and everything in the next packet, not just announcing.
okay. I guess we don't have a district engineer report.
Yeah, he had nothing to report this week, and then saved us the money. And then I have nothing to report, like no joke. I'm sitting here thinking about
Really?
what we haven't covered yet. And
I'm shocked.
if we stop now, we can start again at 1 o'clock.
Oh my gosh.
For a 2-item agenda, that was.
I know, I thought,
Same as that, 4 hours.
I was thinking easy peasy today. Right.
0-item agenda, it'll take.
Okay. All righty, so then, I'm speechless now. So we're gonna go into closed session, and it is now, what time is it? It's
12:50.
Geez. Yeah, how about that? So, what do you guys need, 5 or 10 minutes? Yeah, 5 minutes? Let's just get this.
10.
Okay, thank you. Have a great 2 weeks.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
1 o'clock, okay.
Thank you.
1 o'clock. Thank you.
So did you stop recording?
I have to, oh, how sad. Esmeralda is technically the recorder. How about if we hit leave? Oh, look at that.
Huh.
It won't even let us leave the meeting.
You can't ignore the slow network connection either. All right.
Okay.